Okay, I'm going to call to order the Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021 meeting of the Stoughton Select Board. This meeting is being conducted by remote participation pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, as well as the Governor's March 23rd, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people who may gather in one place. As such, we're conducting the meeting via Google Meets. Participants can join via video conference or teleconference. This meeting is also being recorded for rebroadcast and is being live broadcast by Stoughton Media Access Corporation. As is customary at the onset of our meetings, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd ask if you are able to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States
of America,
to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
liberty,
liberty, and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. The first item on our agenda tonight is citizen requests. If any members of the public would like to make a comment on the citizen's request, I would ask that you please unmute yourself or use the raise hand function, and I will recognize you. Okay, I am not seeing or hearing anyone. We'll move on to our next item, which is select board comments. Oh, Mr. Zemanian, you raised a hand. Would you like to make a comment under citizens' requests?
Yeah, my apologies. Had a little technical difficulty. This is a follow-up question through you, Madam Chair, to the town manager. 2 or 3 months ago, I had requested some information on the speed of trucks moving up and down Pleasant Street. It had settled down briefly for a period of time, but has picked up pretty intensely at this point. And I'm concerned about my children's safety. We live on a corner and there are a number of children in our neighborhood now. I'd like to really get an answer as to what's going on. I never got any follow-up. Did get a call once from a sergeant, I believe it was, in the police department, who basically said, we're working on it. And, it's been some months now. I'd really like to sort of come to some sort of understanding as to what we're doing as a town to slow those trailers down.
Yep, so that would have been Sergeant O'Connor. And I will follow up with him. Let me follow. I'm just looking through my emails to see if I had something recently, but I do not. Let me follow up with Sergeant O'Connor tomorrow.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Zemanian. Do we have any other comments under citizens' requests? Hearing none, we'll move on to select board comments.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Do you have anything for select board comments?
Oh, yes, Madam Chair, to Madam Chair, Town Manager, and my fellow Board of Selectmen, I request that we include in our standing operating procedures and our SOPs that we include in our package information about taxes, tax being in arrears on any parcels that we are considering. Last week, we had a discussion about 1515 West Street, and consistently it came up, well, where do we stand? Are there any taxes in arrears? And we didn't have that information. And then, you know what? Subsequent to that, I attended the CPC meeting because they were considering 1515 West Street, and that same question came up. So I am requesting that we include that information as a standing operating procedure going forward. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you. Mr. McCrisky, comments?
Can't hear you.
Yep, you're on mute.
Well, a lot of people like it when I'm on mute.
I don't know which, Mark, you're laughing at a little too much there, buddy. Don't know where I'm going to go first, but I guess I'll just jump right in with the first. I've been, as you know, questioning, the process of the fire station building committee that doesn't call themselves by that name, but I got to say I'm very, very, very disheartened, concerned, upset with the process that's been used by the building committee to put information out on social media before the board has even had a formal presentation. I know that's been put out that we're building the fire station at the former Armory site, and that they put a $30 million price tag on that project. Well, it would be nice as a sitting member of the select board if I had a presentation where that would be made, and what are we getting for our dollar? Why have we picked it? Why have they picked this site to go with? Does it have the support of the fire chief? Yes or no, or why not, or why? I believe that this is always my fear that some of these boards, when they actually are appointed by the select board, that they take on a life of their own. And this is an issue that affects a lot of taxpayers in town. And I don't think it's something that should be done without the input of the select board. So I would encourage, Madam Chair, if there's something you can do to put everything on hold with that committee. If I have to, I'll make a motion that they put everything on hold until they schedule a meeting with the select board and they make a formal presentation as to why the site's been chosen and what are the costs associated with it, what is the good, the bad of the project. When the motion was made, which I made, to refocus from a public safety building to a fire station, we did task them with being ready for a spring town meeting. We didn't tell them to run with the ball and just do what they want. So that's what unfortunately has happened here. So I don't know if you want that in the form of a motion. I will put it in a motion, or I trust you at your leadership that you will take to the building committee and let them know to discontinue any further discussions on social media. But again, it's already out there, and I think that we're getting into a position that's uncomfortable for the board because people are not getting all the information. They're getting whatever that committee put out, and that's not the final product. And until we have a final product, it shouldn't be put out there where people are going to make the wrong impression. So I don't know if you want that in a motion, or if you think you can do that for us. I would be very happy.
Yeah, I can reach out to the committee chair and vice chair and articulate that. It's my understanding they're going to give us a presentation in the next 2 weeks on the site and have more of the final cost number and all of that. So I think I'm not sure that I can't recall if they're going to meet again in advance of that. They might be. I have to check my calendar because I'm on that committee. But that can be easily articulated to not put any information out. That's preliminary. I agree that it's good to communicate with the public and try to give updates, but also if it's incomplete and not necessarily accurate or reflective, then it can lead to a little bit of a spiral. So I think that's important to communicate properly in the right format and right venue. So I'll make sure.
And for us to vote what we want to do before a committee that we appoint tells everybody what we're doing.
Right.
Okay, that's that one. The other one, I guess I could wait, but I believe that more needs to be done. Is that it was brought to my attention that a sitting member of the board reached out to the MSBA and asked questions representing himself as a select board member regarding the school department's efforts to research a South School project. And I don't know why that would be done without the authority, or a vote of the board. That is something that's more than just finding out information on your own. When you take action like that, in my opinion, you have the potential of putting the school committee in their efforts to move forward with an application to look at a feasibility study and to get the ball rolling. I don't think that it's in the best interest of the citizens of the town, who are made up of people with kids in schools and people who have kids in the South School District, That's not what I think a sitting member of this board should be doing. So I would like it to go on record that I don't believe that that was in the best interest of the select board and of the school department. And I myself will apologize to the school board because I didn't know about that until just tonight. And yeah, that's a slippery slope to go down, Madam Chair. And I don't think it was right for whatever reason when that same person has an article going before town meeting, a petitioned article that deals with the property that the school potentially could go on. I just don't think that's the right thing to do when you have a sitting article for something different, to go looking to the people who, the president of the association that is gonna give the funding. I think that really doesn't look good for our town. It makes it look like we're disorganized and we're not working as a team. So I just wanted that out in the public. I don't think it was right for the member to do that. And wherever this goes, it goes. But I believe that it should be brought out in the public.
Ms. Roberts, you raised your hand.
Yes, for clarification, Mr. McCrisky, what was the name of that organization again? You gave an acronym and I don't.
And Mass School Building Assistance
Authority.
Association Authority.
Yes.
So, and that really doesn't do well, for us, with a relationship with the school department.
And this is a fact? Or is this just
Yes.
hearsay?
Yes, it's fact.
All right, I don't want to get into too much back and forth deliberation.
No, that wasn't my intent.
And when it gets to my comments, I'll give an update on the school committee and school department invited me to sit in on a meeting they had with the MSBA on Friday regarding the South School. I have some positive news on that subject at least, so I appreciate that, Mr. McCrisky, and you making those comments as well. Do you have anything additional you'd
No,
like to?
that's Madam Chair. Thank you. And Madam Chair, also, I guess I want to thank you for your hard work on the draft warrant. I know you've put in a ton of work with the town manager, and we've had some things popping in here and there. That's a heavy lift, and I'm hoping that we can kind of streamline that a little bit so it doesn't take that much of the chair's time moving forward. But thank you to you and the town manager for putting all this together and getting it to us.
Thanks, sure. Mr. Regan, you've joined us. Just want to make sure we're doing select board comments. If you have anything tonight.
Nothing from me, thank you. Sorry, I had a work commitment that delayed me.
Thank you for being here. Mr. Cavey.
Thank you. I have no comments today.
All right, and as I referenced, and Dr. Marcus is on the call tonight as well. I was invited to sit in on their meeting that the school department and some members of the school committee had with the Mass School Building Authority on Friday to discuss the South School letter of intent. And happy to report that of the 70 schools that have submitted projects for this type of full building renovation, Stoughton is in sort of 15 or 30 of the finalists, and is in the pool of 30 finalists, and is one of 15 schools that was having sort of deeper dive Zoom meeting and site visit. I believe they have a site visit planned in the coming weeks. But it was a really productive conversation. The MSBA has a number of representatives on the call, including some architects and consultants, and they were asking some pretty in-depth questions that quite frankly revealed a lot about the state of the South School, and also kind of highlighted a lot of the good work that the school department has been doing to sort of hold over with this school, as well as weather the pandemic. I think one of the most eye-opening explanations, or what I think the MSBA was pleasantly surprised to find out about sort of our remote learning and how we're switching to more in-person learning, and they really they seemed pleasantly surprised by the Stoughton model that has been adopted for this year during the pandemic. So I thought that was a testament to the work of the school department. So just wanted to provide that update. That I was thankful to sit in on that meeting, and they'll know in April or June if the school will be invited into sort of the next phase, which would be that feasibility study. And so you'll see in the warrant tonight, that article that the schools had requested is included in the warrant, which would align with probably that timeline if MSBA was to move forward. So I just want to provide that update. If I missed anything, Dr. Marcus, feel free to add anything there.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you for that summary. And when we get to the article, I'll share a little bit more about the process and my perspective.
Thank you. All right, if there's no additional comments, select board comments, continue onward to Dr. Grimm for town manager comments.
Just briefly, I'd like to pass on a thank you to our Department of Public Works. We had one of those unpredictable, is it going to rain, is it going to snow, is it going to sleet, welcome to New England storms. And maybe it's going to do all of the above and then freeze. They did a tremendous job. We get a lot of positive comments. There's always a few negative here and there, but we really I was surprised at how many posts I saw where people were sort of unsolicited shout outs. So I'd like to pass along a thank you. I had the privilege of going by yesterday morning before the storm moved in. And they were out there around 7:30 just getting those trucks ready and taking a lot of pride in our fleet. And, I know we invest a lot of money, and as we have a warrant article tonight that has trucks that are purchased, it's important to know where that money goes and to see it in action and to see the pride that our workers take in what we do purchase, I think is really an important statement. That's a lot of taxpayer money in that fleet. But I assure you, what I saw were a group of people very proud to be getting ready to go out and do their work. So that's what we pay the money for, and that's what taxpayers pay for. And I just think it's important to have an update occasionally. But thank you to all of those guys. Please be patient. They're getting to sidewalks. Trash was delayed for today until next week. A few people were questioning just because there wasn't a lot of snow why that happened. We had to make that call yesterday because people put their trash out the night before quite often if they have to leave for work in the mornings. And yesterday we weren't sure what the amount of snow would be. Additionally, those same people who work the trash truck are the people who work the sidewalk cleaners and the snow plows. So a lot of it's a manpower question. So just to answer that question that's been floating out there a little. The second thing I want to talk about is the phase 2 rollout of the vaccine. So you may have seen the post on Facebook. It's been a little confusing. The Commonwealth is having people sign up online and do sorts of online signups. People have seen Sharon and Canton on the Commonwealth site, and they think that we're not doing anything because we're not there. We just took a slightly different route to keep it a little more local and a little more under our control to monitor it a bit with Janice. And so we have a phone number. It's on the website that people can call in, leave a message and give your name, your age, and if there's if you say I have a comorbidity factor, just say that you have that. You don't have to say what it is. And just leave the message. And that message machine is downloaded every day onto a data sheet, and people will be called in order to set appointments. The reason we're doing it that way and not giving a specific date is we don't know when we're going to get the vaccines. So we have we just got vaccine in today for the second round of phase 1, to finish off phase 1. We were going to have 50 extra doses, so we started the phase 2. Those first 50 or so people it's do you fit the criteria and what order did you call in? So first come, first serve for anybody who fits the criteria, and we're going from there. So then you will get a call back. So anybody who left a message, please be patient. You will get a call back from somebody in Janice's office. And I have to say, we looked for some volunteers just to download information. I put a post on Facebook. Anybody who wants to help us to download information, because I've had so many people say, is there any way I can help? People have actually wanted to help. And then I had so many volunteers that I appreciate all of you. We couldn't get back to everybody. We had so many offers for help. And that's really part of the beauty of working for a town like Stoughton. I put it out there, and I have more help than I could use, which is great. But we may reach out to the same people when we set up clinics to help coordinate traffic and all those things. So we're really very appreciative of that. But be patient. If you called and left your name, it is there, and we have it. So if, however, one of the things we're telling everybody, if you can get the shot elsewhere, if you can log on to Gillette and get an appointment, do it. Because we just don't know how quickly they're going to be distributing vaccines to the individual communities. We're grabbing them as we can. We partnered with Sharon so that we could get the phase 1 as quickly as we could. But if you can get an appointment somewhere, if you can get it through the Veterans Administration, if you can get it through Gillette, do it. But if not, keep your name on the Stoughton list too. Grab it where you can. So, Thank you. That's my update on that. And I wanted to thank Janice and her team, and again, the people of Stoughton who stepped up to volunteer. I mean, I put out the call, and inside of 2 hours, I had more people than I could have counted. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Grimm. And do you, I guess we can look up that phone number so we can read it there.
Yeah, I'll pull it up right now. Bear with me 1 second. I've got it right here. It was on my Facebook post, right? My memory for phone numbers isn't so good anymore since we have cell phones. I used to be able to remember phone numbers. Let's see. COVID. My COVID link. Facebook. 1 second. Let's grab this. Stoughton Town Manager. And it is vaccine. Okay, I believe. Oh, I thought I had it right there. I apologize. I will get that for you. I'll get that in the next minute or two. I don't want to tie everybody up.
Okay, no rush. We can always, as long as we say it at some point, this will be broadcast, so if folks are watching or listening, we'll get it out. But thank you.
Okay.
All right. So our next 3 items, we have public hearings. The first public hearing is an application for a common victualler license for FCP Bakery Inc., doing business as Stoughton Bakery at 27-29 Wyman Street.
I'm gonna just jump in before you do that motion. I knew I'd get it just as you started. 781-341-1300, which is Town Hall. But the extension is 9255.
All right, so folks can call Town Hall, extension 9255. Submit that information to get on the list for the team for the rollout. So, great. Thank you, Dr.
Okay.
All right. Related to the public hearing item for Stoughton Bakery at 27-29 Wyman Street, is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So made.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. On the motion to open the public hearing, Mr. McCrisky,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan,
Yeah, pardon me, yes.
Mr. Cavey.
Yes.
I vote yes. And Mr. O'Regan, you were the lucky winner of application review, so we'll turn it over.
Just let me know.
If you'd like to present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am lucky because this is a great bakery. So I did have a chance to review the application. This is coming to us on, it looks like the previous owners had sold it and there's new owners of the bakery. All of the town departments have weighed in. The only concern was a grease trap issue, which is going to be investigated further. There was no suggestion that this application be held up because of that. Everything looks in order. There's a lease, there's insurance, and as I say, all the departments weigh in with no questions or problems. So with that, Madam Chair, with your permission, I'll ask the applicant to tell us what they're doing and encourage us that the food is going to continue to be wonderful and we can go in and thank you for doing this. So I can't see where you are on the screen, but.
Right here.
Oh, hi.
Hi, it's the 3 of us. So we decided to buy the bakery. This is probably the second time we've tried this. This is my daughter, Nina. She's one of the owners. She's also a cake pastry art chef from Johnson & Wales, graduated from Johnson & Wales. And this is my daughter, Liana. She's a teacher at Southeastern Regional, and her husband is also manager of a sub shop in Brockton. So he's part of our group also. So what we're trying to do is bring back the Stoughton Bakery as it was, the Portuguese bread, the European style pastries, and we're gonna have some sandwiches, some Portuguese soup, and cakes, because she specializes in cakes. So this time we're gonna have cakes, wedding cakes, birthday cakes, any kind of cakes. And then some special treats that we're gonna make too. So that's what we're bringing in. We want the place to look clean and fresh and be inviting for everyone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I offer for myself and the rest of the board, as you get up to speed and you need folks to help taste and sample the material to make sure that it's good enough to serve to the public, I'm sure that the board would be more than happy
Yes.
to help you out.
We will need that, and it's better you guys than myself.
So would you remind everyone where you're located, what your expected hours are?
We're located at 2729 Wyman Street. We're right next to the train station. And our hours right now is going to be 6 to 6, except on Saturday. Saturday, we should do 6 o'clock if people are still coming in at 6 o'clock. We will be closed on Sundays. But on our opening weekend, if everything goes right, we will be open on Sunday. Just for the opening weekend since it's Valentine's.
That's great. Madam Chair, that's all I have. I'm prepared to make a motion if it's in order after the rest of the public hearing.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. O'Regan. Do members of the board have any questions, comments for the applicants? All right. Ms. Roberts, did you have a question or comment?
All I was going to say was it's nice meeting you, and I can't wait to be a tester of your.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Cavey?
The only comment I want to make is just to congratulate you and also to wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulate you and also to wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Got a little feedback here. All right. Do any members of the public have any comment or question for the applicants?
January 2021.
Has it muted? Yeah, we're getting quite a bit of feedback.
Hello?
Yes, please introduce yourself. Make your comments.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, the individual who called in with a number ending in 39, you're muted. There's quite a bit of feedback, but if you have comment, please
Hi,
introduce.
Christine.
Yes.
Sorry, I had the TV on. Sorry. My name is Paul Alves. I am Precinct 5, and I am super, super excited for that family, Luge, Liana, and Nina, a terrific, terrific family. They're great people. I know they're going to make that bakery one of the best around. Nina's an unbelievable baker. I've seen her cakes. I've seen her work. I've bought cakes from her, and I'm proud and very happy for them that they're bringing the Stoughton Bakery back to where it was before, to superior rolls, Portuguese bread, cakes, pastries. I'm just super excited. So my congratulations to them, and I will definitely give them a lot of business.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other members of the public? All right. So with that, Mr. O'Regan, if you're prepared to make a motion.
Thank you. I move to approve the application as submitted.
Second.
All right, motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will call for a vote on the motion to approve the common victual license application for FCP Bakery, doing business as Stoughton Bakery at 27-29 Wyman Street, as submitted. Mr. McCrisky, how do you vote?
A great big yes.
Ms. Roberts?
Another big yes.
Mr. Rubin?
And I'm afraid an even bigger yes after they open.
Mr. Cavey?
There's a lot of pressure, but I'll give you the biggest yes. Thank you.
And I'll vote a regular yes, but look forward to sampling the bakery, and really thank you all for bringing business to Stoughton Center, and look forward to your success. So,
And Madam Chair, they should know that's only because she runs 600 miles a day.
run through there.
You have to run 600 miles to kill all what you just ate.
I'll be stopping by for sure. So that motion is approved 5-0. Thank you all very much, and we appreciate your application and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Hope to see you all there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to close that hearing?
So
I
made.
moved to close the hearing. I think by voting the license, we closed it, but move to close the hearing.
All right. Well, we'll close it anyways for good measure. All right. I think that motion was made by Mr. Regan and seconded by Ms. Roberts. On the motion to close the hearing, Mr. McCrisky,
Yes.
Ms. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Cavey.
Yes.
I vote yes. All right. Our next hearing is application for a lodging license by Saxon Management LLC at 99-101 Porter Street. Is there a motion to open the hearing for the lodging license?
So made.
So made. Oh, second.
Okay. Motion made and seconded. A motion to open the hearing. Mr. McCrisky,
Yes.
Ms. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Cavey,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Ms. Roberts, you reviewed this application?
Yes, I did, Madam Chair. We received an application from Saxon Management LLC, signed by Paul Johnson. This is for property located at 99 through 101 Porter Street here in Stoughton. It's for a permit to operate a lodging house. All documents seem to be in order, except the purchase and sale agreement seem to be outstanding. It was signed and dated on December 7th, 2020 in the amount of $1,495,000. Just going through the checklist, who reviewed and signed off. The building department said they were all set. The treasurer collector said there were no delinquent taxes. The fire department signed out and said they had no issues. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, they paid their license fees, issued on December 16th, 2020. The police department said they had no objections. So it looks as if the last open item was the purchase and sale agreement. And I would like to turn it over to Mr. Johnson or a representative to talk more about that property, please, and the application.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me? I just want to make sure.
Yes, please introduce yourself.
Perfect. My name is Daniel Vieira. I represent Saxon Management. Paul Johnson is the principal of Saxon Management, and I know that he's on the call this evening. I can certainly send to the board a copy of the purchase and sale agreement. We expect to close before we pick up the license, so we likely could provide the Selectman's office a copy of the recorded deed or the purchase and sale agreement. I know Mr. Johnson is available to answer questions. Just by way of his history, he actually operates or has operated two other similar type of rooming house facilities, both in the city of Brockton. One we recently sold, and we're doing a 1031 exchange to buy the property that's here in Brockton. The two that he's operated have been 12-unit and 10-unit buildings, so it's certainly a business that he's very familiar with. He has both administrative staff and management staff who can undertake managing this building. He's been in the rental business for more than 15 years, so it's something that he's experienced in. And I'm sure this will be, a much improved and added to his inventory and to his business. And I know that he's looking forward to coming to Stoughton, and I know that he's on the phone call. And again, I can provide you that additional purchase and sale agreement. I certainly could have sent that before this evening if I knew that was outstanding. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that any board members may have, and certainly Mr. Johnson can do the same.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Vieira. Ms. Roberts, if you don't have any additional questions, I will turn over to other members of the board for question.
No additional questions at this time.
Thank you. Mr. McCrisky, I see you've raised your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe the prior vote was that we wouldn't release any permit until we had the signed purchase and sales in our possession. And with that not being here tonight, I don't know how we can move forward this hearing. So I think I'll hold off making a motion unless anybody else wants to. Because I can't see, our vote was that we wouldn't release anything until we got that purchase and sales. We don't have it. So it was a very simple discussion tonight.
Madam Chair, we do have the purchase and sale agreement as part of the agenda packet. It's signed. It is part of the agenda packet.
Okay.
Find it.
Well, in that case, I would like to, if there are no other questions from other board members, I'm prepared to make a motion to approve.
Okay, we'll just see if there's additional questions and then hear from the public as well prior to that motion. I do see the PNS in here. I think I see a signed PNS.
Okay, well, I just going by the comment made that it wasn't here, and and the attorney saying they could send it over to us, so I just haven't seen it yet, so I do apologize.
Mr. Vieira, do you know what date that was executed, just to ensure we have the correct version?
Sure. There was only one signed, so
The
I
date
was
is December
thinking it
2nd.
was outstanding by virtue of the comment. So the purchase and sale agreement is dated December 7th, 2000.
December 7th?
Yeah, that's what I have in my packet. It's on page 66 of the agenda packet, so we do have executed PNS. To be fair, it was at the end of the the packet. So.
Right.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Other members of the board have questions for the applicant? Okay. Hearing none, I'll turn it over to the public. Do any members of the public have comment or question on this application? I see the phone number ending in 06 as unmuted.
Yes, Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Clark Street.
Good evening, Ms. Walsh.
Good evening. I'm calling in to support this. Isn't this a transfer? Isn't this an existing lodging house?
Yes.
Well, I happen to know folks that live in this particular lodging house, and it's very, very necessary that we provide this kind of housing to folks, particularly single folks, who just don't have the resources, even though they're working, to buy a condo or a small home in Stoughton. Everyone needs a safe place to live, and so I support this petition for a license.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Do we have any other members of the public that would like to speak on this application? Okay, hearing none. If no other members of the board have any comments or questions for the applicant, Ms. Roberts, if you're prepared to make a motion, we'll entertain.
Yes, I move that we approve the application for license for the property located at the 99 through 101 Porter Street, Stoughton, Massachusetts, to Saxon Management LLC.
Second.
Okay. Motion made and seconded. Is there additional discussion on the motion? Okay. Hearing none on the motion to approve the lodging license application by Saxon Management for 99-101 Porter as submitted. On the motion, Mr. McCrisky,
Yes.
Ms. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Capey,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Vieira, and thank you to Mr. Johnson as well.
Madam Chair, could I make one other quick comment?
Sure.
Not getting directly to the license. I just wanted to thank the selectmen and particularly the staff at your office. They did an excellent job. They were responsive, professional, and thoughtful. And I know that people don't necessarily say that, but it's worth noting that I go to a lot of cities and towns, and it's nice to have people that get back to you and give you the information that you need. So I want to let that be known.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. We appreciate it.
Have a good night.
You too.
Good night.
All right. Our next hearing is a continuation of the hearing for the exercising our right of first refusal for 1550 West Street, part ID number 037037, 037038, 037039, and 037040. This continuation again of our January 26, 2021 hearing. A motion to open the hearing, continued hearing.
So made.
Second.
Motion made and seconded on opening the continuation of the hearing. Mr. McCrisky?
No.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan?
Yes.
Capey?
Yes.
I vote yes. That motion passed 4-1. All right. So when we last left off, we were waiting some additional information on 1515 West Street. The only update I have so far, I reported some tax information, Dr. Grimm to describe, but the other update I have, this went before the CPC. Roberts, feel free to chime in as well. I know you're on that call. Presented by the Open Space Committee, consideration purchased by the CPC, and that was not approved. Largely, the folks did not feel it necessarily was either the right timing or the property wasn't, there wasn't enough information about the property, particularly some on-site potential issues. And it didn't quite meet what they were looking for from the CPC's perspective. So that was, I think it was a 4-2 vote or something like that. But a similar presentation to what was our board was presented to the CPC. That's my update on 1515 West Street. Dr. Grimm, I know you circulated that tax information. We had quite a few questions about the arrearages, or potential arrearages. I don't know if you want to just summarize what was circulated.
Yeah, very briefly, they owe approximately $10,000 on all of the lots, and that is all taxes owed in this last year. So my presumption is they had been paid up until that point. I think what probably happened there is from the time of someone who thought they bought it and didn't necessarily buy it. I'm not sure who would have thought they were supposed to pay the taxes at that point. So my sense is everything was paid up until that point of the confusion, and that seems to be where things were awry. Obviously, if the board were to move forward in town meeting, were to move forward to have me negotiate that would have to be cleared up before any sale would take place.
Do other members of the board have question or comment on this item? Mr. Cavey?
Normally with projects like this, where something becomes available and there might be some use that interests a group in town, perhaps like the Open Space Committee or anything along those lines. I'm interested in making those options available to them to pursue. Also, I want to make sure that town meeting is given the opportunity to exercise their own will in questions like this. So for that reason, I think that everything we've done up to this point to make sure that we had the opportunity to exercise our rights, I feel still comfortable that that was appropriate. But now that we've had a public discussion about this and it's anecdotal, but for the most part, I felt like the comments from the public lean more towards a disinterest in buying this rather than an interest, though there were some people who were interested. But as you mentioned, this went before the CPC, which would be a financing source for this property, and there wasn't much interest from the CPC. I think it was, as you said, 4-2 against putting money into this. So that committee itself is made up of people I would have normally assumed, if there was some value in this project for the town, they would be interested in pursuing it. And so, I kind of take that as a strong indication that there isn't a strong interest in this property. Additionally, now without CPC funds, we'd be looking at regular borrowing, which I would, I think ultimately that won't make it through town meeting. I'm a little bit torn because I still feel like town meeting does have a right to make these kinds of decisions, but I also think that this is almost certainly dead on arrival and would not be a good use of town meeting members' time.
Thank you, Mr. Davey. Mr. O'Regan?
Madam Chair, just a procedural question on the status that if we're going to deliberate, I'd be prepared to move to close the public hearing if there are no further members of the public who wish to be heard. But I would urge that we be careful about deliberating during a public hearing. So I throw that out. I'll make the motion if, as I say, if there's no more public input coming.
Sure, I'll do one final sweep of public comment on this. There are members of the public who've called in that would like to speak on 1515 West Street. All right, Mr. O'Regan, it looks like there are no additional comments from members of the public.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion to close the public hearing made and seconded. Is there discussion on that? Hearing none on the vote. Mr. McCrisky?
Abstain.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Pavey?
Yes.
I vote yes. That motion 4 yes with 1 abstention.
And Madam Chair, for deliberation purposes, I move that the town decline the right of first refusal on the potential to acquire the property we've identified as 1515 West Street on the agenda.
Second.
Motion to decline the option to exercise the right of first refusal on 1515 West Street and seconded. Discussion on this motion.
Madam Chair, the reason I made the motion is primarily because we have no funding source. The only source I would think to look to during these economic times to pay for this would be CPC funds. If the Community Preservation Committee had voted in favor of this, my motion would be the opposite. I accept and am coming to understand myself more and more what John Lenahan has told us about the connection of this parcel as an overall point of continuity for migration and other things for wildlife, in addition to the general view that we're not making more land, and there's a host of reasons to preserve the character of that part of town. But for 4 house lots, of 2 of them of unclear development potential, and the other 2 with some challenges on development, I do not see hitting the taxpayers with that burden out of the general fund. And just to serve the people with the facilities we now have, is more stress on the taxpayer than I would like to see, and that many taxpayers believe we can afford. So that's why I made this motion, and why I believe in fulfilling our role, we should decline to exercise the option or the right of first refusal. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Regan. Any other members have discussion on this motion?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, Ms. Roberts?
I wanted to talk about the pricing again on the just to make sure I'm clear and it can go on record. So as the right of first refusal, we're looking at roughly $300,000, right? But they had taxes in arrears and I didn't get that dollar amount. Did Dr. Grimm provide that? I'm trying to see what the net number is, that's all.
So the property would be 330,000 and the arrearage on the taxes was about 10,000.
Oh, I didn't hear that. Okay, thank you. No further questions.
I have similar sentiments as Mr. O'Regan. I think this is an important open space parcel for the town. However, we're in the midst of a pandemic and unfortunately we can't keep borrowing. I think the purpose of the CPA fund is to do things such as preserve open space, and unfortunately if that isn't the funding option, then I'm not sure how we can afford to pay for this. Even though it doesn't seem like a high number, it starts to add up and burden the debt service, which we all know comes out of our operating budget annually. So the more you borrow, the more it costs you year over year, and there is a limit on that. So unfortunately, that I would be voting in favor of this declining of the exercise of right of first refusal for those reasons as well. Any other final comments from members of the board before I call for a vote? On the motion, Mr. McCrisky?
Yes.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Cavey?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Madam Chair, if I may, another motion
Yes, Mr. O'Regan.
on the same topic. I move that the board convey to the Community Preservation Committee availability to reconsider this vote for a potential special town meeting, if there is one called, to occur within the annual town meeting, if a positive recommendation comes from the Community Preservation Committee by March 15th, 2021.
Okay. Motion essentially made to reconsider, depending on the CPC's decision to be made by March 15th. Is there a second? I will second that motion for discussion.
Madam Chair, the reason I make this is because, as I understand it, the presentation to the community preservation, like the presentation to us, one of the challenges for the CPC going forward was a sense of incomplete or insufficient information. But the need to preserve open space and the need to not lose opportunity to preserve open space, especially given how Mr. Linehan explained this parcel as connecting for wildlife, deserves consideration, every consideration we can give it. With no funding source, it can't go forward. But if the Community Preservation Committee would consider it in time for us to put it on, if there is a special within the annual, that would be worthwhile to consider. As Town Council told us last week, we are still in a, because of the pandemic, we're still in a stay of time for operation of these kinds of time limits for the town to exercise. So there's no curtain dropping on the town right now on the town's ability to exercise it. And for the sake of all of the volunteers who spent a lot of time and effort framing our open space plan in which this parcel has a role, I would just like to make sure, as a credit to them, that if they can have the Community Preservation Committee entertain it, there's a window of opportunity that hasn't closed. Doesn't mean we'll approve it, but that's the spirit behind this motion.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think this gives us a little more opportunity if it presents itself, but doesn't necessarily tie us to anything. So I think the way our town government functions tends to lead to some handcuffing and hamstringing, but this maybe gives us a little more wiggle room to address this property if more information comes to light and it is reconsidered. I think most of us have expressed that this is an important parcel, save for the ability to fund a purchase of it. So that's why I seconded the motion. I think it's a good plan moving forward. Mr. Cavey?
Given this, that we've just, so we have a second in Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Okay. So given the fact that we just decided to not exercise our right of first refusal, what exactly is there to reconsider that by CPC?
That's, Madam Chair, that's why I made the motion, because we could I believe that a majority of us voted the way we did because we don't have a funding source to send to town meeting. If that were to change, it would be, I think many of us would think again about whether we would do it. If this vote carries, then my third motion will be to delay conveying the this decision to not exercise until after March 15th, so that we have not formally exercised the right of first refusal. But if it doesn't come back to us, this vote stands after March 15th.
I guess with that thinking, is there a reason we wouldn't have just continued or not voted on the right of first refusal until after March 15th?
We could do it that way too. I just didn't want to have a bunch of unfinished business for us to keep track of, and I thought it was better to close it off and then allow it to come back than to leave it hanging. That's just how I thought of approaching it.
I mean, I think either way, it's still technically unfinished if all these are approved, but
it comes back on an initiative as opposed to us trying to reinstate it. And that's just what I was, in terms of managing what we do.
Mr. McCrisky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As well, I was on that meeting, and if I may be paraphrasing a little bit, but Mr. Morton also said as part of that there were bigger parcels coming up that were more interesting that could be coming up soon. So, you know, the CPC voted down, you know, the funding request, and I don't believe there's anything that we can do. We can keep placeholders and we can do whatever we can, but you know, process is the process. So they voted down the funding. Mr. Morton believes there's projects that are more interesting coming up in the future, so I won't be voting for this motion.
Mr. Cavey?
I typically would support a motion like this. I think that once again, giving town meeting the opportunity to exercise the right to make these kind of decisions is important for us to facilitate. It's something that I've often has drawn my concern in previous boards and previous select board members that items that town meeting would approve, they would kind of kill before it got a chance to even get to them. sort of filtering out things that the ultimate deciders on these matters, town meeting, might want to do. They would prevent them from even considering. And so generally, I err on the side of offering town meeting the opportunity to deliberate on things I think they might find interesting and worthwhile. But coming out of the pandemic that we've experienced and we are currently in, and the economic impact that has had, the impact it's had on families, businesses, tax revenues, the schools, every area of our town and the way we live. I have a hard time finding a priority for this at this moment. These things may not ever come up again. This might have been a valuable project, but we have a finite amount of resources, both financial but also in our personnel and their time. And the time it takes to focus on this, I believe, can be better used right now on things that can bring us the sort of financial rebound that I think that we need to focus on right now. So thank you.
Any final discussion from members of the board before I call for a vote? Hearing none. All right. So this is a motion that the board convey the availability of of reconsidering this article if there's a special town meeting within the annual for possible reconsideration by CPC by March 15th, 2021. On the motion, Mr. McCrisky.
No.
Ms. Roberts?
No.
Mr. O'Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Cavey?
No.
I vote yes. It fails. 3 noes, 2 yes. So I just think, O'Regan, you do not need to make your third motion. So there's
I can
nothing.
take it anyway, but
I guess it wouldn't make much sense. Okay. There's nothing further on this item. I would ask the board if we could take our consent agenda next. We have a representative for item B on our consent agenda with us, and so I'd like to take that over if everybody's okay with that. Okay. So the consent agenda, we have item A, payroll and bill warrants and any other documents to come before the meeting. Item B, which is the item we're going to poll to reauthorize intermunicipal agreement with Southeastern Regional Services Group, SERSAGE. Item C is a Keno application by J&G Hillside Grill for 1137 Park Street. Item D is to approve the schedule for maximum useful life of equipment by various town departments for borrowing purposes. And item E is to approve our open session minutes of January 19th, 2021. So as I mentioned, I pull item B. Would anybody like to pull any other items? Okay. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda items A, C, D, and E?
so made.
Madam Chair,
Mr. McCrisky?
Madam Chair, I apologize. I tried to raise my hand and I lowered the screen so I couldn't hear or see. I was going to ask if item D could be moved to next week. I'd just like to have a little time to research that, unless there's any real big need for it now.
Which one was G?
D is the maximum useful life cycle of equipment.
Okay, we'll pull that then as well.
Thank you.
Items A, C, and E.
I move to approve consent agenda items A, C, and E.
Second.
Okay, motion to approve A, C, and E made and seconded. On the motion, Mr. McCrisky?
Yes.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Cavey?
Yes.
Vote yes. So item B, this is the reauthorization of our IMA with SERSAGE. This intermunicipal agreement we entered into 25 years ago. So it is up for renewal, as we're only allowed to enter into agreements for 25 years. So this was originally approved through a town meeting vote, which authorized the select board to enter into the agreement. And I understand that Moira Roos is on the line. If you'd like to introduce yourself and give us a quick overview of what Sursage is and does for the town of Stoughton.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me to your select board meeting tonight. My name is Maura Rouse, and I am the regional administrator of the Southeastern Regional Services Group, as she said, also called Sursage. My organization procures contracts used by town administration, public works, and schools in Stoughton. The documents that I provided to Fran Brutiniti for you are in your hands, and they are detailed and complete. To summarize, as Ms. Howe has just done, is that the intermunicipal agreement formed under Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 4A, had a 25-year lifespan. Stoughton signed on to it in January of 1997, and it is up for reauthorization. Are there any questions I can answer about the materials that have been provided to you?
Mr. Regan?
I have two. One is, how has the town benefited from this arrangement? What kind of intergovernmental agreements over time have we entered into? And the second is, wouldn't we need to have this agreement reauthorized by vote of town meeting?
Okay, so to answer your first question, every year in your Stoughton town report, there's a section from the Southeastern Regional Services Group. I, having produced the report covering calendar year 2020, can tell you that for last year alone, Stoughton benefited from contract pricing on Department of Public Works supplies, Department of Public Works services, paper, and office supplies that are used by your school, as well as administration buildings and water and sewer treatment chemicals. And you participate also in the drug and alcohol testing bid that I procure. So in using Sursage contracts for, let me use one example, the water chemical liquid potassium hydroxide. The contract that I secured costs $1.26 per gallon less than the lowest available price on a state contract for that same product. By using the Sursage contract instead of a state contract widely available for any town and city in the state, you've saved $50,400 off of that state price because your quantity is quite high, and I was able to provide a contract with a preferable price. The intermunicipal agreement itself defines that Sursage will serve procurement needs, some training purposes, and other administration through contract execution. So I do not administer your contracts. Once they're executed, they're in the hands of your procurement officer, Fran Brutiniti, or in the case of Public Works, supported also by Tom Fitzgerald and your Highway Department. So every year you participate in bids with my organization that provide contracts to use. Obviously, Stoughton also bids for many of its own contracts. All your buildings are bid under different general law and handled by the procurement office. I wanted to say that the intermunicipal agreement that Stoughton signed is part of what created Sursage in the first place. And the reauthorization is required simply because this organization ceases to exist if it's not authorized by member communities. It does not need to go to town meeting because of the Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 4A defines that it can be entered into by the select board or board of selectmen for each town or city council in the case of a city. And this recommendation for reauthorization was provided by KP Law attorney Greg Corbo, who is our attorney representative, and provided the documents you've received today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I've got.
Mr. McCrisky, did you have a question or comment? I see your hand is raised.
No, that must be the one I messed up on the last time. Sorry.
Just checking. All right. Any other members of the board have questions regarding the IMA? Is anybody prepared to make a motion on this item?
The motion wording was provided by KP Law for your convenience. It's on a memo included in your packet.
So that motion would be that the board vote to reauthorize and amend the intermunicipal agreement that created the Southeastern Regional Services Group so as to extend the term of agreement for a period of 25 years from February 1, 2021, subject to any rights of termination or withdrawal, with all other terms of the original agreement remaining in place without changes, and to authorize to be the person we choose, the select board, to execute any document, or I guess this could be for the town manager, to execute any document necessary to effectuate the purposes of this vote.
Second.
Did folks all see that motion in the materials provided? Okay. I guess I made that motion and Mr. McCrisky seconded it. Is there discussion on the motion? Okay. There's no further discussion. I'll call for a vote.
Yes, Madam Chair. I heard Mr. O'Regan's question regarding the benefit to the town of Stoughton, but I would like to ask, who does she work closely with within town? And how have things changed over the last 25 years, or how you do business? So that's a long period of time. I just wanted to see how things have changed, and who do you deal closest with? Who do you collaborate and partner with in the town of Stoughton?
Oh, I'd be glad to answer that for you. I work with Fran Brutnitty primarily with your procurement office. There is a representative for every member municipality on the board of directors of the Southeastern Regional Services Group, which is to say your town directs the business that we do. I have not been here for 25 years. I was hired in 2015 into this position, but there have in that term only been 3 substantial procurement officers in Sursage. So we've had long tenured employees. I've been here 6 years. My predecessor was here 10. Her predecessor had been there 10 years before, and the organization has substantially changed. At the time it was originally formed, through my research, I learned that it was formed to help towns address the increasing demands on, on everything. That was the time the Equal Opportunity Employment Act came into being, that the Americans with Disabilities Act came into being, that the counties in Massachusetts were effectively abolished, so that county level procurement could no longer go forward, and procurement was now in the laps of towns and cities to do on their own. Southeastern Regional Services Group was formed to allow a group of towns to join together and share services for training, for procurement for goods and services according to Mass General Laws 30B and 3039M, leaving the more complex building procurements to towns and cities to manage themselves. I have been here 6 years. We have continued to expand our contiguous member border out by a few towns. It now includes Milton, Hanson, Dighton, Medfield, which had not been members before I became employed here. I think the benefits are that you get large-scale purchasing, even though your town might only use I don't know, 15,000 gallons of something. We band that together with a number of other towns. We can get a vendor who will deliver to our district for a price that's much lower than if they were driving to all different corners of the state. So it's mass purchasing really is the greatest benefit, and it's organized through my organization. I am the only employee, and it's a nonprofit, so I am not a town, but I am acting like a town and on behalf of all the towns, and I'm run by the towns and cities. I hope that's been enough and not too much information.
Yes. I had a total of 3 questions. That answers one, and thank you very much. It's very helpful. The second question is, what metrics do you have or do you that rule you to ensure that you are, when you're going through your procurement process, it is more abiding by those laws? What is that? Chapter 7, 9, Disabilities Act, so the ADA. How do you ensure that you are following those laws of non-discrimination?
Well, I put bids out. At this point, that is the primary function of Sursage. When it was originally formed, there were human resources projects completed by the then administrator that served the towns before each town hired and retains its own HR department and its own compliance department. Those original features of Sursage sort of fell away as each town and city became held more accountable for its own compliance. In terms of procurement, I am NCPPO certified, trained by the Inspector General's office, and must retain a certain amount of recertification in order to maintain that title and that certificate. Every bid that I do is advertised as widely as I possibly can. I am at this point also looking into an additional vendor listing component of a future website design that would allow our bids to be even more widely advertised. I don't ensure that each town is doing with that lowest bid contract what they're supposed to, but I advise to that direction for all the member towns that I support. I just procure contracts at this point. The trainings that I offer are for the highway department, and they are through certified hoisting license trainers and through the Inspector General's office. Those are the only trainings I continue to provide. The historic reference was to some of those big changes in the state that created Sursage, but those are not all maintained in the present day administration of the group.
So before I get to my third question, I'm just looking forward to all entities throughout the government to have a more global reach, and that is minority be included in some way, shape, or form in that. And there are metrics that prove that out. So with that said, my third question, I defer to Dr. Grimm, and through her direct report, Ms. Fran Frulicelli. I know I botched her last name, but do you foresee any challenges with the contractual agreement going forward? Can you share your opinion and assessment, Dr. Grimm?
Yeah, Fran has not indicated to me any concern about going forward with this. She works with Ms. Ruse consistently, and typically if there is a problem, Fran would have brought it to my attention. So I'm comfortable with us moving forward and renewing this agreement.
Thank you very much. That's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair, as well.
Okay. Yep, we do have a motion that's been made and seconded. Any additional discussion on this? Is that Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead. You're on.
I'm off. I didn't. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry about that.
All right. Okay. All right. If there's no additional discussion or questions, I'll call for a vote on. All right. On the motion essentially to reauthorize the name with Sursage, Mr. McCrisky,
Yes.
Ms. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Cavey,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Thank you very much, Ms. Rouse. We appreciate your presentation, your attendance tonight. Thank you to Fran and Dr. Grimm for continuing to work with this. It saves the town lots of money, so that's what we like. So I appreciate you being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Good evening.
We did have one last item on the consent agenda we pulled, that was to approve the schedule for maximum useful life of equipment by the various town departments. And Mr. McCrisky had a question if this could wait a week or if it was sort of imminent. Dr. Grimm, do you have a response to that? Or I'm not sure if Bill Rowe is on the line as well.
I know Bill is on the line. I don't have a problem with the delay. I don't think it's on any hard deadline for Bill, but I would defer to him on that.
Mr. Rowe, are you there?
Madam Chair, Bill Rowe, Town Accountant.
Hi, Bill.
Yes, that could wait a week. That could wait a week. That's fine.
Okay.
Just that we want to get this borrowing requirements wrapped up as soon as possible. 1 week would be fine.
Okay. All right, Mr. McCrisky, is that sufficient time?
Yes.
All right,
Thank you.
we'll take that item up next week.
Madam Chair, I'm wondering if it's acceptable to hear what Mr. Rowe has to say so we can have an opportunity to think about it for a week. Because he's here and the information is here, and maybe we just need to process it.
Sure.
Not
Bill,
delay the decision, but.
do you want to give a summary of what this is for extending the maximum useful life for the equipment purchases?
Sure. So with the new Municipal Modernization Act, their equipment that has an estimated useful life of 5 to 20 years must be a particular useful life must be designated by the select board, and that would govern the maximum term for which we could issue bonds. And that is a standard requirement of the what's called a requirements letter that we get from bond counsel, which is kind of like a list of things from an underwriter if you're going for a mortgage that need to be fulfilled. However, this is not as critical as would be, say, an advertising for the public hearings in September and October. That's the real critical thing that we need right now. So this could actually wait a week.
All right. So with that, I think we'll just take no action. We'll move that to next week's agenda. So, thank you, Mr.
Madam
Rowe.
Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair. Yes, and you should look at that vote in conjunction with the emails that I sent from the department heads, which have the recommended useful lives.
Great. Yeah, I think that information was in our agenda packet, so we'll be sure to review it, and if we have any questions, we'll let you know.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
And feel free to call the department heads if you have any questions on those lives. So.
All right. That should conclude our consent agenda items, so we can get back to our regular business. Sort of meat and potatoes of the meeting, which is our 2021 annual town meeting. Tonight we have to vote to close our warrant. We also have been including a budget discussion on here. I understand there was some changes made to the budget. So Dr. Grimm, if you want to take up that first, and then we'll get into our warrant articles.
So there were a couple changes. One sort of negative to us that Right now, it looks like we would at minimum have level funding from the Commonwealth. However, the cherry sheets on the retirement costs for teachers that came through, the education retirements, were higher than anticipated. So similar to what we have with joint costs, those are costs that are out of our control, and we're sort of at the whims of the calculations on the retirement. However, on the other side, on the positive side, we were able to reduce, the veterans agent was able to reduce the veterans benefit line item by $50,000 based on his assessment of need of what he has to have. Chairwoman Howe had sent a list of some areas that she wanted us to take a look at. I know right off the bat, 10,000 of it we will be able to. Mr. Fitzgerald reassessed the hazardous materials line item. So we are able to find about 60,000. We've been able to reduce our sewer subsidy by about 27,000, as I had indicated last week. We elevated the description, redesigned and redescribed, redefined, I should say, a position. We brought someone in who can broaden out the scope of that position, who we had been contracting out work prior. And even with the slight increase in salary we had to give to elevate this position, the offset overall to the town is probably, I think, about $60,000 split between water sewer. So our sewer subsidy drops, I believe, about 27,000. So out of the general fund, we've been able to come up with about 87,000 more to start closing the gap. I'm still working on the spreadsheet that Chairwoman Howe gave me. In some other areas, there probably will not be any big ticket ones that we can hit. That 10,000 was probably the largest one chunk that we could find, in addition to the veterans agent finding the 50,000. So we're working to close it. We still, there's still a lot of strong belief that there are more federal grants coming for schools. Sue Herman has mentioned to me a couple times that she believes that at least the first 6 months of next year's budget, so through December of 21, there will be CARES money coming, or CARES-like money coming for the schools, and we hopefully should know that within the next month or so. We will see where that goes. And then the other thing is our debt line item may drop a bit again, as it did when Mark got the first grant for the sewer, the MassWorks grant. If we were to get the EPA grant, I believe our debt service line item may drop a little bit more, and that would close a significant gap. That grantor has been in touch with Mark and has been aggressively asking for updates and information. So fingers crossed that they're pushing for more information is a very good sign. So we're hopeful.
Great. Questions on the budget for Dr. Grimm? Mr. Cavey?
So Dr. Graham, I appreciate you providing us the credits and debits with the. I might have missed you saying this, but grand total, I know before we had a break from our last meeting since the last week, we were initially, I think, about $180,000 short. I know that with the state numbers that came in that we have, that came closer to, I think, 280, maybe 300,000. And you're right, that the majority of that was, I think, retiring teacher health care costs. Shockingly large. It is what it is, but I'm not surprised that we didn't see that coming. But where do we stand now with the new adjustments? How far off are we from balance?
Approximately 230. I don't think that sewer calculation was in there, so that might drop us to about 205 or so.
Okay. So that's great. It leaves us not all that far off from where we were before. I was expecting to see the cherry. Actually, when we saw the cherry sheets, I looked at the new revenues. I thought, okay, well, this is good. This is good. Then I saw the charges. My heart sank. Not at all what we were hoping for,
but it is possible we may see an infusion like we did last year of that 500,000. It is very possible that the feds will do something, and there's a lot of chatter about that. So,
yeah. this is always what I've described as crazy season, right? This is the ups and downs of the roller coaster, and it does tend to work in our favor in the long run, because we through the guidance of town employees like Bill Rowe, take a very conservative stance early on, and so it tends to protect us, which is great. But we should, going forward, make some attempt to work through a contingency if we don't get quite as lucky this year. But I appreciate everything that you've done to get us as far as we are. I know it's can't get any skinnier than this, and right now we're really just looking underneath the couch cushions to see how much closer we can get.
If that sewer grant comes through and we are able to reduce that debt service line item on the off the top, that will help significantly.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think the couch cushion analogy is a good one for the spreadsheet I sent Dr. Grimm. So it's like, do we need this dollar here? But sometimes that's what you got to do until you can get balanced if it's tight. So it's I appreciate you looking into that, Dr. Grimm, and sending all those questions. It was probably at least 3 or 4 for each department. So
that's fine, and it's always a good exercise. And you know what, we did relook at that 10,000 on the hazardous materials, and Tom tossed it around and said, you know what, we probably can knock that back to what it was. So it's always helpful to take another look. I mean, we go over that time and time again and find a little bit here, a little bit there. I do question on some of the small ones. If you're looking at year-to-dates, I know you all get the year-to-date. One of the things to be very careful of is I have a hiring and spending freeze. So it's emergency hiring and emergency spending only. So a lot of our year-to-dates may look very, very low. That does not mean that we won't need those things next year. It's just that we are really in a holding pattern. So I know in a lot of cases where I've made cuts, it will be very hard to ever recover that money because I don't really want to present like a 6% budget next year increase. But in some areas where we haven't cut, even though our year-to-dates are low, it's because we know we will need that in the following year. We're just not spending because I had a short FinCom and the board that if they held the budget intact, I would make sure I had enough to turn back to offset whatever came in from stabilization as best as I possibly could. So I do caution people when you're looking at the year-to-dates, those can be a bit misleading because everybody's on a freeze and I go, deny as it comes into I have a bunch of things on hold right now in my Munis thing about why do you need this? So.
Yeah, that's a great point. You had replied that to me. So, because I think a lot of them are just question mark year-to-date actual question mark. So that was a great explanation. I appreciate that.
It gave me a chance to make sure people weren't spending because I don't always go over those all the time. And so you pointed out all the ones that are low, and I'm like, good, those people aren't spending. You pat a few people on the back and didn't even realize it.
Happy to do it. Ms. Roberts?
Yes, Madam Chair, I believe this question is for you specifically. So the Board of Selectmen, in my view, we are really the only entity that is responsible for the whole town. So that is municipal side, the school side, the kids, the age, everyone. So when I hear Dr. Grimm talk about the cuts that are being made on the municipal side, I have to ask, what are the cuts that are going to be made on the school side? And I must say, this question is for you, Madam Chair. I look to you for some direction in this area. Now, I have my own ideas, and some of my ideas is, well, if we cut off the top, knowing that if we continue to go after these grants, and then the grants will come in. And that is a hopeful way of thinking, but hope is not a strategy. And I'm really looking for strategy on how to cover all of these shortfalls. We don't have revenue that we need to cover both the town side and the school side. We will never hit that threshold, never, ever. So, we are who we are. So we do need a strategy to try to make it through. And like I said before, I have some ideas about that, but right now, you said that you wanted to take the lead on that, and you were working directly with the chair of the school committee. And then it was also said that Dr. Marcus was working closely with Dr. Grimm. So that kind of leaves the remaining board members out of the loop, just waiting to see what happens and then to vote on what happens. So please share the strategy.
Sure. So I think, I mean, there's a lot in what you just said to kind of tease out and address. So in terms of what this board does, sure, we run the town of Stoughton. The school committee is the governing body for the school department. So when we receive that school budget, it's just as any other department budget that we would receive, fire, police, DPW. The difference is, you know, it is a line item budget, and they do share all of the backup that goes into it. And they have a series of mandates and requirements that they need to meet on their end. And so that budget is worked out and determined by the school department, approved by the school committee, and then forwarded on to the town to be included in the overall town budget. So in terms of my sort of exercise in going through departments to make cuts, or really it was just to ask questions about items to see if we could reduce. I did reach out to the superintendent and the school committee. They did provide me with an option to reduce their budget. I think it was a $15,000 reduction if it's needed. So that was an exercise they went through with that department. And then Dr. Grimm, I sent all the others so that she could work with her department head. So I wasn't emailing, 30 people with 3 questions each. And she could probably answer a lot of them anyways because of, as Dr. Grimm just mentioned, that year-to-date thing. So it's more of that was more of me kind of like doing a budget exercise because I saw a deficit and freaked out a little and wanted to not have a deficit. In terms of the sort of budgeting strategy, I think, from the town's perspective, Dr. Grimm has repeated this, that they do performance-based budgeting, and they ask for what they need to run the operation and provide service. I believe the schools do the same process. They're not asking for more than they need, and they also have mandates they need to meet. So from that perspective, that's where the sort of numbers all come in, and we have to make a decision on that. And so I think to say that we'll never have enough revenue to fund our budget is not entirely accurate. The budget is a projection, and we tend to conservatively budget. So we're using a percent of previous year's revenues, for example, on local receipts that are technically 2 years behind and at 97% or less when we're using that to make our projections. We don't know what the actual tax levy is going to come in at per se when the books all close at the end of that particular fiscal year. State aid fluctuates when you get the governor's budget versus House 1. There could be grant funding. So it's an exercise in trying to prepare as best we can to create a balanced budget, which we're mandated to do, but don't necessarily have all the revenue in the pot at the time that we're making it. So it tends to be kind of a little bit of a challenge, a push and pull. And as Mr. Cavey said, we end up coming out on all right on the other end. I don't think we're sort of living outside of our means by any stretch of the imagination. The town budget, I think, was a 1.8% increase. The school's budget was like 2.2%. So, it's really driven by things that are kind of out of our control, like some of these joint expenses that just go up and up and up. So the state aid we got, the governor touted it, and this was one of the issues I had with it. They were all excited to say it was a 3.5% increase for local aid over the 2.8% they usually do. They failed to leave out that the assessments went up 8.9%. So that's a great soundbite for them, but it's not reality. So there's a lot of factors that come into it, but I think each group and each department is doing the best they can. So the strategy is usually to provide the service that we can provide, level service typically, if not more, within the means of what the town can afford. So
Madam Chair, this is Dr. Marcus, and I'm happy to step in and speak to the schools as well. I know that Ms. Cochran also has her hand up, so I defer to her, but I'm happy to offer that very similar to what Dr. Grimm described, we work very, very closely with our department heads to make sure that the budget that we present is as conservative as possible. Certainly this year, we worked very, very hard to come in at a percentage much lower than we have, and to be very, very mindful of where we are moving into in terms of the economic future of the town and the state. And so we've been very, very careful with that. And so I think, Ms. Roberts, we as the administration present our budget to the school committee, who review it very carefully to make sure that we are moving forward in a way that is fiscally responsible, as well as making sure that we're serving the needs of our students as best we can. So please be rest assured that we are also taking very great care to present a budget that is very conservative and very fiscally responsible.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Marcus.
And I think Ms. Cochran had her hand up.
Yeah, okay, Ms. Cochran, I'll let you speak. I don't want to get into too much of a sort of back and forth here, but if you have information to add about the budget process.
No, I think Dr. Marcus said it very well, and I just, and obviously I think your overview of the budget and what your response to Ms. Roberts' questions was very, very good. I just would say it's not like we're just another department of the town. It is a different beast, and there's different authority within the school committee. I don't think the Board of Selectmen needs to come up with a strategy to deal with our budget, but clearly we're in discussions with Dr. Grimm. We're in good faith discussions with the board, but it's for the school committee and the superintendent to tinker with our budget and make whatever adjustments we need to make. But I have nothing else to add to what Dr. Marcus said. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cochran. All right. Anything else on the budget discussion? All right. So our next part of this annual town meeting item is the approval of our warrant articles for 2021 town meeting. I think we have 3 sub-items here, 3 additional articles to discuss that we have not yet discussed as a board at our previous meetings. So I did want to call those 3 out. We have a petition to abandon a paper street located off Page Street, a request for CPC funds in the amount of $185,000 to restore a fire truck for the Historical Society, and the Charter Review Committee term length request, which is actually a carryover from last week. I did want to also, I included all these in the draft warrant that was circulated, so what I can do is I can pull up that warrant and we can go through each article, and if there's any that we want to pull to discuss as to whether to include or not, I think that might be the best process, because a lot of these at the beginning part are sort of the usual form or sort of standard articles that we include. So I think that approach will at least allow us to, in a concerted way, go through and determine if there's any changes that need to be made on anything, or anything that needs to be pulled out before we vote to close the warrant. So if that sounds like a good process for folks, I will pull up the warrant.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
All right. This is our standard language here. So Article 1 is the annual town election. If there's no one that wants to pull that, keep moving. If there's anything you want to pull, just use the raise hand function, and I'll recognize you and you can pull it. Article 2 is receiving reports. 3 is to accept contract funds for town roads. Again, standard article. Article 4 is to apply for federal, state.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, these are not final. Is that what it's, I don't have a hard copy in front of me. But these are not final? Is that what what the sign said? The signage says?
On this, we'll vote the warrant to close it, and then this will be the language that'll be included, and then we'll have motions under each article. We determined that we don't need to include the motion language in the in this article description when we approve it. So once we close it, we won't be able to add anything else. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
4 is to apply for and accept federal state funding. 5 is for our disposal of town property, if there is any. 6 is our Cedar Hill Enterprise Fund budget. 7 is the Public Health Association Enterprise Fund budget. 8 is the Sewer Department Enterprise Fund. 9 is the Water Enterprise Fund. 10 is Cable Public Access Enterprise Fund. Article 11 reauthorizes revolving funds. We have the Council on Aging, Recreation, GIS, Youth Commission, Community Events, Conservation Commission, Board of Health, Stormwater, and the Compost Rain Barrel. 12 is collective bargaining for SPEA union. 13 is collective bargaining for police superior officers. 14 is collective bargaining for THEA. 15 is our supplemental fiscal year 2021 departmental budgets. 16 is our operating budget. 17 is unpaid bills. 18 is to rescind unissued borrowing authorizations. 19, we have our capital equipment purchases. Dr. Grimm, were you able to finalize that number on the cruisers?
That number is accurate. The 225 is accurate. Only thing I have not finalized is the total, only because I was not sure. I did not have anything for the schools on capital, and before I finalized it, I wanted to be sure that there was not.
Dr. Marcus, is there any school capital purchases?
Not for this item, no, thank you.
So we just need to retally that number. I'll do that now.
Okay.
So if that, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if that number is retallied, then the total budget number is retallied as well, right? So that is the 106. I forgot what article number it is because I don't have it up on my computer.
So this is Article 19 for capital equipment purchases. So it would be.
Oh, that's capital. Okay, sorry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is just borrowing.
Of these items here listed under each of the departments.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Grimm will just check that. 949.
I'll work on calculating that for you. Be simple. Yeah.
Article 20 is our town building and facilities, maintenance and upgrades. 21 is the sewer I&I. 22 is our stormwater program permit compliance. 23 is the stormwater bylaw. 24 is Concom's lake management. And this is for the town-wide lake management program. 25 is the CPC budget. And there's the breakdown of each reserve fund. 26 is for the construction of Stoughton Fire Station. 27 is sewer station upgrade. A little feedback from Mr.
Question, Madam Chair, on Article 26.
Yep.
If we finalize that $30 million, we know that's the high number, so we can't adjust it downwards once we hear the presentation of 26 or on the February 26th. Is that correct?
No, change that amount.
Oh, I'm sorry, your phone, it cut out. I didn't hear you.
Yes, we could reduce it.
So if we approve that today, then before the presentation on the 26th of February?
Right, the idea is that number could only go down, so that's
I get it.
Right, if it were to change to say 22 million, then that's what we would change it to. Mr. O'Regan?
Madam Chair, I have to disagree. I think the estimated cost in the explanation is not part of the warrant article itself. The warrant article itself does not contain a dollar amount. The dollar amount would be furnished in the text of the motion with the final number. And one of the things that we've been working on for the past few years was on items for which we don't have a real good or fixed dollar amount. You see this, I think, in the capital item in particular, where the I think it. But I'll just stick with this one. It says to raise and appropriate a sufficient sum for the project without putting the dollar in, and then we don't have to worry about going beyond the scope of the article if it's arguably, I could hear if it's $1 more, is it beyond the scope, and we wind up doing that. So the operative number on this article will come in the context of the motion made. The estimated cost on these items are not in the warrant itself, so that shouldn't be a problem. And to clarify, I mean, to agree with what Ms. Howe said, that's a high number based on what the committee has seen. The expectation is that's going to go down, but the 30 million will not be in the text of the warrant article if we approve this format.
Right, and I think having the estimates, though, is what we end up being able to send to, say, FinCom or the other boards and committees, so they have something to work off of and begin their work with these articles. So that's right, Mr. O'Regan.
So for clarification, it's my understanding FinCom already has these articles and they're working on them, knowing that we are sharpening our pencils, right?
Yeah, we sent a number of them over the last several weeks preliminarily. So like all those capital equipment purchases we sent a few weeks back. So they were able to get a jump start on the backup material and everything else. Article 27 is the sewer pump station upgrades.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Rowe?
Can I make a comment on Article 25?
Sure.
In the heading, it should say fiscal 22 budget. And that whole section where it says proposed motion, that should all be deleted. That will come in later on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. I take no credit for typographical errors.
Madam Chair, before we leave Article 26,
Sure.
this might be a good time to indicate that the committee that is developing the presentation and the recommendation on the fire station is meeting on the 10th. And then I think the 22nd, but twice this month for the full presentation of what this building will be and harder numbers on what the costs would be. Of course, those meetings will be posted. They're public. The chair of the committee does allow for citizen requests or citizens' comments at the beginning. So if people are interested in learning how it's coming along, what the closer real number to be requested is, what the features of the building will be, I'd encourage them to watch those meetings. The first I know is on the 10th, and the second is 2 weeks later, but the date escapes me. I haven't got it in front of me. I think it's the 22nd, if that's a Wednesday.
Yes, I believe that committee is going to present to us on the 22nd. We had discussion earlier in the meeting, Mr. Regan, before you joined, that this board has not yet made a vote on the site or approved the site selected by that committee. So it was requested to provide that presentation before continuing to do sort of public outreach before this board.
Which board hadn't?
The select board.
Okay.
It was requested to have that committee provide that information to this board so we could vote in favor or not of the proposed site before they did public outreach for a proposal. I'm just going to be in communication with the chair of that committee to express that. And I think Joel said they would come before us in February, which I believe is Tuesday, the 22nd.
Thank you.
Okay. Article 27 is sewer pump station upgrades. This is in 28, we included the purchase of the 1515 West Street based on the vote of the board tonight to not exercise right of first refusal. I think it's clear we're not including this. Is there anyone on the board that feels otherwise? I think the vote was pretty clear, so I can remove this tonight.
Agreed.
Okay, so we have a new Article 28. Park Street Betterments. This was presented by Mr. Tisdale. Article 29 included the acquisition of property at Fanon Drive. We do have to discuss that on our agenda as the next item. If the board would like to entertain a motion to, or we could pull this and then discuss it at the same time as that item if a motion is made to do such. Basically just put everything in here that we've talked about. So that's why it's in here. So
Okay.
Mr. McCrisky?
Madam Chair, I'd make a motion that we pull Article 29 for the purpose of discussion.
Okay.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. McCrisky?
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan?
No.
Mr. Cavey?
Yes.
I vote yes. So again, this is begin the discussion now. This was the Fanon Drive property we've been talking about. I think Dr. Grimm circulated an updated memo from Mr. Tisdale with the bullet point items. related to this acquisition of this? Did everyone on the board receive that?
Yes.
So I guess just my that memo, it sounded like the general sort of like positive reason, the pros, I guess, on the pros and cons list was that it would, obviously the town would have control of the parcel, all portion that can be used for industrial development. But primarily the use of that would be to construct a road that would connect Park Street and Sumner. And it would also, right, there's two town-owned parcels that are on sort of either side of that land, and it would then connect those parcels. The cons of the acquisition are mainly the cost, so not only the cost of the acquisition, but the cost of building out the road to give it the purpose of its use, which I think was estimated around $2 to $3 million, depending on what the project is. Mr. Regan?
Yeah, yes, I appreciated the report that we got, and to me, it boils down to price. We don't know what the price would be. If it's a significant price that doesn't match the utility, I think we would not go forward, and this article should be dismissed. If the price is right, it doesn't mean we build out the road or do anything with the property otherwise now, but it gives us options. The fact of the matter is, if we choose to make our own options, they're better than the ones that get left when other people are done with making their own options. And it is, to me, worth considering that this is another area in town where the zoning may not be compatible with what we want it used for. And I'd ask everybody to think of what the town went through on Cushing Street when there was an attempt to insert a recycling facility, which was an as of right use, but required some permitting, abutting, across the street from the middle school, and in a neighborhood that had evolved to be a largely residential area, but the zoning hadn't kept up with the aspect of the town. We have a similar situation with this property in parcels that are in reservation for some array of future uses by the town. That is in an area that, if you look at the maps, over the development of the town from the 1950s to today, is wonderfully more residential than it was back then. So the ability to see to the use compatible with potential future uses of, or the town would make that space available, compatible with the residential character of the area, in addition to giving the option for a road in the future, are all benefits that are spoken to. And I think all that does is tell us that further investigation is appropriate, and we should reserve the spot here, because if the price is right for what we get, we're also told in the two write-ups we received from Mr. Tisdale that of the, I think is it 11.9 acres of total, there's significant watershed resources for building and construction, so that if there are other uses put to these properties, there's a place for the water to go. That's an expensive construction cost that this system would give us. And it gives us the opportunity for a road. So I think the issue is we get an appraisal, we see what the price is, and if the price is workable, we buy it. But even if there's 2 or 3 acres of buildable industrial space on the property, the incompatibility with the current and ongoing development of the area makes that worth paying attention to. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Regan. Go ahead, Mr. McCrisky. I'll let you speak first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It just, I'm trying to keep everything that I mentioned based on facts, and there's now a new set of facts. So now we're focusing on zoning, other than what we talked about previous of taking a look. If we go with protecting everything based on potential use for zoning, I would challenge anybody to take a ride with me, and there's probably 200 to 300 sites in town that we should be buying then, if we're going to use that philosophy of the previous speaker. We decided to look at this for the potential of seeing if it would be worth adding, for the use of a fire station, a school, or whatever. That site has not been utilized now for the future site of the fire station, as discussed by the building committee. And I don't see this as something that the select board should be taking up. In the movement of the school committee, as they proposed, and research this as a potential site, if they feel it's a value to what they're going to be doing, then we should leave the ball in their court. I think this is something that it's sort of like, okay, it hasn't worked out the way we wanted it. Let's look at it this way. And the whole argument about, although I do agree with it, is not relevant to what we're dealing with here. That we're going to look at now keeping and moving forward with this because we want to protect the potential use and make sure it doesn't get out of hand. We should do a major rezoning of the town and look at everything if we're going to do that. So I'm not in favor of moving forward this article. I will, if I don't make the motion personally, I will, and I will not be voting for it.
Ms. Roberts?
Oh, yes, Madam Chair. I can't help but be so pleased that Dr. Marcus and Ms. Cochran is on the line. We rarely get a chance to have them in our public hearing. But while Mr. O'Regan was basically laying out the groundwork, I could see Dr. Marcus shaking his head, and he may have been shaking his head negatively for some other reason, but I would like to know if his expression and body movement was in relation to Fanon Drive. And if the answer is yes, can I please hear what he has to say about it?
Dr. Marks, I know that the department heads were contacted about the property, so if you'd like to speak on behalf of the school department to explain.
Sure. My concern goes back to when I will talk about the article and some concerns that I have about some of the things that have gone on with members of the select board. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. However, in terms of this particular property, it seems to be that if there was a road and that was going to be connected to something for the purposes of the schools, that we don't need that. We have the property where the larger property, and we're going to be looking at that for site purposes, and that's and that connects to Park Street. The other property where South is connects over to Ash. So for us, there's not any good reason to look at this.
Ms. Roberts, do you have any additional comments?
No, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Yeah, on this one, I think it almost kind of relates back to our discussion of the 1515 West Street parcel. I don't know how much this parcel is going to cost. We haven't received an appraisal, but to make it useful, it definitely will be a $2 to $3 million build out. And I'm not sure we wanted to burden town meeting with something we thought was valuable open space in the borrowing and all that, let alone this parcel, which has some benefits, but nothing in the sort of imminent, immediate future that we would need. And as Dr. Marcus described, it's not sort of make or break for anything. That would be useful over there for those two non-contiguous parcels. So I have trouble approving or sort of being in favor of something like this acquisition at this time when there's no clear use for it. I think it's, you know, we learned how the majority of it is wetlands, and there is a small portion that could be developed industrial that is currently active industrial development. I think even to relay back to the 1515 West Street, folks seemed really interested in receiving tax revenue from developed land, which I mean was kind of a surprise, especially on sort of a scenic area. So I think that's a concern for folks, is sort of revenue generating properties in this town, and the town kind of gobbling up different properties and owning things without a clear plan or path. I think the timing, at least, is very premature, I guess. I just don't see an immediate, imminent need to purchase this. I understand the positive benefits, but I think the cons, particularly the cost, outweigh that at this time. Mr. Cavey?
Yeah, thank you. I overall I agree. I think that you know, we've received a detailed memo from Mark Tisdale that provided I thought very helpful insight. We've also been presented with some photographs and maps and other info along the way, and I'm just not seeing a way to get to yes on this. Even if the land cost us, you know, practically nothing, the idea of constructing a road there is coming in with an estimate, you know, a rough back of the envelope estimate of $2 to $3 million, and you know, we've been fighting for years now to try to find some way to get $1 million, you know, or $1.5 million to get the armory shored up. Finding that or twice that for a piece of land that we may or may not have a use for, I think is going to be an awfully hard sell to town meeting. You know, as I mentioned earlier, I tend to err on the side of offering town meeting the option to examine these, but I don't want to provide them with a request that you know, it rather clearly has very little benefit to the town. You know, this idea of having a road, it's not that big of a town. You know, we don't need an extra road to cover that area. Of 12.5 acres, only 2 acres are developable at all. So whatever we spend, we only get really any sort of benefit. You know, it's, you know, for 15% of the land, purchase price of the land. And I'm not seeing anything here that really says like this is something the town meeting is going to, you know, take seriously. So, you know, for the time being, until we have that, also we don't have a funding source. So whatever it may cost, you know, between now and May, I'm not sure how we get there, and also I still believe that our priorities have to be elsewhere right now. That's all I really have to say about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cavey. Any additional discussion from members of the board? Mr. Napierski, did you want to make a motion on this? I think you had stated that earlier. If other members of the board want to?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make a motion that we pull this article.
I'll second that.
Motion to pull Article 29 as it appears on the screen. Made by Mr. Napierski, seconded by Mr. Cavey. Discussion on that? Hearing no additional discussion, I'll call for a vote. Mr. Napierski?
Yes.
Ms. Roberts?
No.
Mr. O'Regan?
No.
Mr. Cavey?
Yes.
I vote yes. The motion passes 5 yes, 2 no.
Chairwoman Howe, I have the number for that Article 19.
Okay, I'll add that in.
What I have is 1,185,000.
Slow calculator over there. I know you're waiting.
It's called my cell phone at work.
Oh. Where are we now? 29, okay.
All right, so I updated the numbers here. So we have, the next item is the deposit to the stabilization fund. Deposit to our building stabilization fund. Deposit to fire apparatus stabilization. Actually, I should update these numbers as I go. I apologize. Reappropriate funds from the 2020 health appropriation. I just want to confirm that is the right year. Is that correct, Mr. Rowe? (2020) health appropriation. Just want to make sure it shouldn't be 20 or. We'll get confirmation of that hopefully soon.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Article 34 should say fiscal 21. 22 or 2021 health appropriation.
So 2021 or fiscal 21?
2021, yes. Mhm.
Right.
Or fiscal 21, or fiscal 2021, either one.
Okay.
And while I've got you, Madam Chair,
Sure.
the enterprise articles,
Yep.
5 through, those dates need to be, fiscal years need to be corrected as well.
Sorry, I missed those. Tried to catch those today.
It's tough when you're in the year and the year is 2 years.
Yep.
And
It is. So, yeah, 5 through 10, they all need work.
Great. Okay.
6 through 10. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm making everybody dizzy on the screen, but
Yeah, you are. My eyes are doing this.
close your eyes. All right. Okay. Next article is the feasibility study of the South Elementary School and an owner's project manager. This was the request by the school department and school committee. Know if Dr. Marcus wanted to make any comments on this article before.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. As many of you know, this has been 10 years in the making. We've been applying for a building project at South since 2010, and we're closer than we've ever been, which is why we are at this exciting point of being able to submit this article. In speaking with representatives at the MSBA today to verify that this article was written in accordance with their requirements, I was surprised to discover that a member of the select board called the MSBA executive director on their own accord and asked about the South project and how it is in competition with the public safety building. And also asked the MSBA executive director about the process that the MSBA uses and about the possibility of a 2-year delay when the MSBA presents or awards projects. As Mr. McCrisky stated earlier, I am just wondering why someone from the select board would call the MSBA and possibly jeopardize this critical project by raising questions or doubts in the MSBA's minds. I'm extremely disappointed in what happened. I'm extremely disappointed in the actions of this person, and I see them as undermining the hard work of years of school committee members, parents, and staff for the benefit of our children. I think that calling a school-focused state agency as an elected official outside the knowledge of the board, outside of the knowledge of the school committee or the superintendent raises serious ethical concerns, especially as the questions that were asked seem to be related to a non-board citizens petitioned article. I'm extremely concerned about this. I'm extremely disappointed, and I'm very upset on behalf of the schools and the children that something like this would happen.
Thank you for the statement, Dr. Marcus. I think earlier in the meeting, Mr. McCrisky expressed his concern after hearing what you stated, and you did send me an email earlier today, and I did want to apologize on behalf of the board for any potential, you mentioned undermining or confusion. I think in the conversations that you've included me on with the MSBA, have been clear that the town has voted and supported the LIs or letters of interest for the South Elementary School, and I hope that that is clear to the MSBA. So I can't speak for that individual member, and I don't think this is the forum necessarily to do so. But I respect your wishes to make those comments tonight, and just want to make it clear that this board has voted in favor of those letters of intent, and we want to work cooperatively with the schools in your pursuits, particularly for this South School project. And I hope that, as with the high school, we can be successful as a town pursuing these types of grant funding and make these capital improvements together. So I do apologize that you had that experience with the MSBA that occurred. Again, I don't know if tonight is necessarily the forum to discuss it. I think that member of the board can reach out individually to you as well. And I think we'll leave it at that, but I do appreciate you following up on the language to determine if it is sufficient for this article. I wanted to make sure that all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed. So I think the way it exists warrant tonight is appropriate, and I have no issue with it in that regard.
And I thank you for your support, Madam Chair, and I appreciate your statement. And I really hope that this does continue to move forward, as it's an incredibly important moment in time for all of us in the town of Stoughton. And I think that this is an important place to be with this article. Thank you.
And as I had mentioned earlier, the MSBA indicated they would be making a determination on whether the school would move into the next phase in either April or June. So with that, I think it's appropriate to leave this in the warrant. In the event it meets that April timeframe or even June, would be close to our town meeting. So I don't think it's premature, which would be the only other with this funding. So, and as is customary, we tend to include school department requests and school committee requests in our warrant. If no other members of the board wish to comment on this or pull the article, we can continue on to the next one. I did lose place in what number I'm on. Let's see, 34. This is the Special Ed Stabilization Fund. Dr. Marcus, I didn't know if you wanted to give another synopsis or summary on this. We did discuss it at our meeting in December.
Sure. Just very briefly, this is gives the public schools the ability to create a stabilization fund for the purposes of unanticipated special education costs. This is the kind of thing that many districts have put into place in order to deal with some of the major special ed items that may appear or may occur from one year to the next. And the stabilization funds allows us to not go into operational funding or to come back to the town and ask for additional funding when there's an unexpected big expense. So this is something that I've seen in other districts where I've worked, and it's been a very effective tool to help keep budgets stable and moving forward.
Members of the board don't wish to pull this, we can continue on.
Oh, I have questions.
Did you want to, okay, you have a question?
Yes, I would like to pull that article for additional discussion, please.
Okay.
Article 34.
All right. I'm not sure we need a formal motion on that. I think we can, if you want to discuss it. Ms. Roberts, go ahead.
Yeah, I do. So I, through you, Madam Chair, to Dr. Marcus, how would that work? Would that funding be if there is like turnbacks from your budget, then those turnbacks would automatically go into this proposed stabilization fund, or what would be the source of information or source of funding? I
Sure.
didn't really understand that from the way it was written.
Sure. Typically, there are a couple of ways in which a special education stabilization fund can be funded. One is through an actual appropriation or through the operational budget. That's not our intent. It's more along the lines of what you just described, where if we had a year where there were additional funding at the end of the year, then we would be able to take some of that and move it into the stabilization fund through a vote of the school committee. So it's not something that would happen from one year to the next. It really depends on each year and how we end the year in terms of the situation of those schools.
So would you also utilize grant writing funds to support the stabilization fund and this effort? So would that be additional stream of funding for you in that case?
That's a good question. I don't think we would try to actually fill the fund using grants or those kinds of things on a regular basis. If there were typically grant funding is for a very specific purpose. So I doubt that a grant would be able to be used for a general purpose like a stabilization fund for special education. But that's but that's something that we would look into. But it's not something that we would typically write a grant for. No.
Because you can see how others would get a little not concerned, but they would look at a special ed grant to support a special ed need. So there's
right.
a direct correlation there. So that's the reason I asked that question.
Right. We would look at, I would look into whether or not a grant can, if there's overage, that it could be rolled into something like that, but typically not.
Okay.
Sure.
Did you have any more questions on this article, Ms. Roberts?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Okay. As I mentioned, it's typically customary for us to include the school department and school committee requests, so I've continued to do so as a directive of this board. All right. Article 35 is the supplemental funding for the COVID-19 Emergency Housing Assistance Fund. We had discussed this either, I think it was our last meeting. This was approved by the CPC. That's this article. Okay. Article 36, and Mr. Regan, I had included this. I think you had mentioned including this again. This was for the Stoughton Center
Yes.
legislation. My question for you was if it was defeated at the special town meeting, are we able to reinsert it as an article again, rehear it at the annual town meeting?
The only prohibition that I'm aware of is a zoning article, a petition zoning article cannot come back for 2 years on petition, although it could come back if brought forward by the planning board. And this is not a zoning article or a petition article.
No. So I reinserted this, that request. If members of the board don't have any comment, question, we'll.
Madam Chair, as long as you're on this, I have a question of, I see that the downtown zoning, rezoning, is I think appropriately not on this warrant article. But I know that they're having their public hearings. Are you aware of whether it's anticipated that that'll come forward for a special within the annual or some other time?
I'm not exactly sure on the timeline. I think I didn't fully read. Mr. Charbonneau sent out like 8 documents to us today, us being the working group, and he sent a memo to the board. So I think that's going to be determined. I would personally like to see it as a special within the annual so we can get it approved sooner than later. But I think as we tease out the timeline, consultant a little more, we'll know, because it is very close. It's just a matter of getting those hearings in and sort of squaring everything away so that the full bylaw package can be presented in its final form. So,
because I think for context, this might better work with the downtown zoning. One of the things I think what we would like to see accomplished is this work with some of the green space requirements that might come through in some of the downtown zoning or some of the other aspects of making the downtown work. And so I thought of putting it on the annual because we were, when this came up, I think in November or December, optimistic about having the downtown rezoning be in the annual. But I think if we're going to be on a virtual town meeting and the downtown rezoning might come up either as a special within the annual or maybe some other special town meeting, that this one would work better in that context. Because I think to get to get everybody's heads around on what we're doing in the downtown is part of the challenge to this article. I think it would be fine to wait until the annual the special within the annual. And since this is a petitioned article to the legislature, I frankly, with how the legislature is working with the pandemic, if we do it that way, it's not going to affect how quickly this gets passed.
okay. Would you like to make a motion to?
I'll make a motion that we remove Article 36 and defer this to when the downtown zoning article is presented.
Okay. Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made. That motion is to defer Article 36 to the meeting when the zoning article is presented. Is there additional discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Mr. McCrisky?
Yes.
Ms. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Cavey,
Yes.
I vote yes. Article 36, this is related to one of the sub-items we had on the agenda. The Community Preservation Committee approved the funding for the restoration of the antique Stoughton Fire Engine 2. Mr. McCrisky, if you'd like to just give some background on this for the members of the board who weren't able to attend that CPC meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Was invited to submit a request for the funding of the restoration of the Stoughton Historical Society's antique fire truck. For those who don't know, I was able to secure the return of that truck back in 2005 and raised the money myself to get that truck back, as well as the maintenance fees and everything else that we've used for that truck since it returned to Stoughton. It's been used for a lot of great historical things. And one in the presentation to the CPC, I had mentioned that the CPC has been there for a lot of historical items, for historic documents they've purchased in the past, slate roofs, windows on antique buildings, the fire station roof. I mean, they've done a lot. Everything they've funded is completely different than what the antique fire truck stands for. Is it's the only item that goes to the residents. And I know my colleagues on the board will remember that this was probably the first time in history of the town that we didn't have a 4th of July parade due to the COVID. But the antique fire truck was out around town for 7 hours, driving into the neighborhoods, visiting with families, going down the street. And it was something that this piece of living history, it goes to the public. This truck served Stoughton from 1928 to 1956. And at such time, it was relieved from service. It went to a monastery down on the South Shore to protect the buildings on the monastery. After, I believe, about 5 years at the monastery, it was sold and it went down to cranberry bogs down on the South Shore of Massachusetts. And they used it. They took the body, the firefighting body, off the back of it, put a flatbed on it, and they used it to put all the hoses on the truck and to use the pump to pump cranberry bogs. They would, pump the water from one bog to another. And then in the early to mid, I'd say the earlier 80s, there was a gentleman named Howard Briggs, who was a retired firefighter that got the truck and did 99% of the restoration. Then it was followed, he got sick, and it was followed by a gentleman who was named Bill Donovan. Bill Donovan was also a retired Brockton firefighter that got the truck and finished the restoration. And back in, I want to say probably 2002, in that area, we did a rededication of Pye Park, located at the intersection of Canton Street and Central Street. And I was chair of the board that year and saw the fire truck when we went for the rededication. Thought it was kind of cool that this fire truck, was back in town, and then noticed that it had our name on it. And that's when Mr. Donovan filled me in on the story of the truck. And at that time, I said to him, if you ever sell this truck, I said, I'd love to have the right of first refusal to get it back in Stoughton. And he said to me, and I'll quote, he says, Joe, the day the truck is ready to be sold, that's where I want it to go, is back to Stoughton. So again, in 2004, after a vote of the Historical Society Board of Directors unanimously, they gave me the authority to start raising money to get the truck back. And again, we raised all the money, got the truck back. And one thing is, as great as it looks good. When you look at it close, you realize that it could use a renovation. The engine is old. It's 92 years, and we're putting it together. But every time we go to a parade, if you look in the back where the hoses used to be, now there's toolboxes, there's hoses, and anything else that could potentially break down. And it's time for a renovation. So I spoke with the CPC committee at the meeting, and we had a lengthy discussion on the potential of a partial renovation versus a full renovation. And there were other issues that had popped up, and under the smaller dollar amount. And it just, I think that I can't speak for why they did, but the CPC did vote unanimously to do the full restoration of the fire truck.
Okay. Great. So we've included this at the recommendation of the CPC. And as Mr. McCrisky just outlined, do any members of the board have any additional comment on this article? Okay. Mr. Cavey?
Thank you. This is a question more than anything else. I know in the past when we have brought matters related to that are funded by the CPC to town meeting, and even before that, as we're bringing them through the various committees, like the finance committee, the CPC has often made a point to say that they are funding these things, but that they are not the petitioner, and so we have their request by a CPC. I think that has in the past caused some confusion about who should show up to which meetings and who to ask questions to, and who's ultimately responsible for providing information to these various committees. To that end, is it the Historical Society that's making this request, or was this something that went through the CPC on their own?
No, this was an application, and it's not a borrowing, it's a cash vote. This was an application that went through. I submitted. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Historical Society. All members of the board of directors signed the letter of support, so it was a full vote of the Historical Society board of directors to request this. And I went there, and yes, you're correct. One thing I would like to change is there is several times where I'm referred to as select board member. And I'm not in that capacity. I was not there as my capacity as a member of the select board, but as a member of the board of directors of the Historical Society, which I've been since the late 2000s. Yeah. So I would, when the final article is there, it would do that, and I will be the one that'll be there to answer questions on behalf of the boards as this goes through the process, as well as a presentation at town meeting. And I will most likely be presenting the same items as presented to the CPC to town meeting for their knowledge, and be ready to answer any questions, Steve.
I appreciate that. I'm not much of a car person, so these things don't always hit me as much as I know they do other people. But the nostalgia and the value and the history of items like this really can't be understated. I recall even just not that many years ago, we saw a presentation on the fire department itself, Station 1, in which they had old footage of one of these old fire trucks coming out of the building in 1927. And it's hard to believe the world that we inherited without seeing it and without understanding and getting a chance to touch it, get in the car, get in these vehicles, see what the engines look like. As much as I'm not necessarily, I don't always appreciate the mechanics of it, the historical value, I definitely respect, and I think that's, I appreciate you taking this through CPC. I'm glad that they voted for it.
Thank you. And Steve, it's not as much the value of it being an antique truck. It's and this is I'm a history nut, and I love history. Sometimes I think I relive it too much, but it's really who that truck represents. It's the things we've done with it. We've got pictures on a lot. And back in 2014, there were a lot of the retirees that were sitting on the truck posing for a picture, and almost half of them are not here now. There are four people that have passed on that have had rides on the fire truck. I'll share one story just about the history, is that some people may remember Leo Malin. Leo Malin was a member of our finance committee for a long time, and I offered him a ride on the fire truck at an event we had for the Grenadiers of the Historical Society. And that a week prior, Leo, he was in the hospital, and he got out and wasn't expected to live. And my question was, hey, Leo, you want to ride in the fire truck? And he says, I'd love it. And then I realized what I just asked him, and I had to go to his wife, Jean, and say, did I just mess up? You know, is it okay for Leo to ride on the truck where he just got out of the hospital? And she said, Joe, what he just went through this past week, she goes, if he wants to ride in the fire truck, he can have a ride in the fire truck. So we took him down to Station 2. His son, Scott Malin, is a member of the fire department. And it was great that they got to, to take pictures on the truck together. Right about a week to a week and a half later, Leo passed away. And it's things like that, that it's the history. We have 2 fire helmets on there in remembrance of Edward Kelleher, was the Stoughton Fire Department's first loss in the line of duty, as well as Victor Melendi. And we have pictures of Mrs. Kelleher, who has since passed, placing the helmet on the truck, as well as Mrs. Melendi, and it represents the men and women of the fire department, and in those days, strictly men. But there's, we have quite a few women on our fire department, and it represents what those public safety people do. And even a blink towards the police department as well, because those are our front line of defense, in the town of Stoughton. So it really is something that, should stay around. And I applaud and thank the CPC, because we made a statement this year. We made a statement, that it's going to live on for 100 years, that we want to remember those who have served our town. We always see the big national stuff, but, it all comes down to, the old book, It Takes a Village, and I won't quote the author, but, and that's what it is in this case. It's something like that. And, it was fun actually going through the process.
If this won't affect my vote, this is just more of a point of interest. But I imagine given the age of it, a lot of those parts have to be like manufactured. If you can't just find an old fire truck and get you could get an engine block or something. Is that right, or are there repairs that need to be done?
Yes, you're spot on. That's why we're going with the renovation, because most recently there was a part in the truck that it was made. This was a small manufacturer of fire apparatus called Maxim in Middleborough, Massachusetts. And they made everything custom built. So there's parts on that truck that are, only built for a Maxim truck. And we had a drive shaft piece actually break away. Again, it's 92 years old. When it happened, though, it was 85 years or 87 years old. And you're going to have things break. Well, it took me 5 years to find another part. So it was down for a while. And by doing this, those parts, if they need to be remanufactured, that's what's going to happen. We were able to find this one. And what's nice about that truck is it's 100% historically correct as it served in Stoughton. It only took a few modifications, but everything, all the parts on it are still original. And when we do this, we may modify some to make them stronger for the future. But that's the beauty of it. It's the most historically accurate truck of its age. That's only about 4 of them that are owned of that year, owned by the municipality, whether it's through their historical society or a fire association or the town itself. So we're definitely in a very small group of people to have that. And, for the one we have, it's one of the best, I can tell you that.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
I don't want to sort of cut off you all, but we're getting a little late tonight. So if you want to nerd out about the fire truck part outside of the meeting.
How appropriate. I take that with a badge of honor, the nerd out. I like it.
Yeah.
But if no one is going to make any motions otherwise, we'll keep this in and continue on for our next item. And Mr. McCrisky, you had requested this item as well. I didn't have full language here.
Yes, and we'll get that, Madam Chair. This one is, and I think that I can guarantee only Mr. O'Regan will remember this, is years back, 2015, I believe, the town voted to disperse some land that was no longer useful. And we did that. 2 of them were put into private hands, and we get taxes for that now. And the last one was a small piece of land. If you look at the whole plot plan of the maps, it's a postage stamp in the middle of a football field. And we voted to let that go out. There's one property owner up there that owns everything, everything in the area except for that little postage stamp. And he wanted to purchase that, but there's a right of way that goes through there that needed the approval of the Norfolk County engineers. Now, it took some time to do that between, lawyers and doing the title searches and all that. Well, that's been done. Our board will get shortly a request from an attorney representing the property owner in the area to abandon the road. The work has already been done through the Norfolk County engineers who are in support of it because it's basically landlocked. And as we all know, somebody who owns the center line of a paper street has the right to utilize it. But it's going to be cleaner, if it's a large piece of development going on. And I don't know what type of use it would be, but right now it's a portion of it's wet, but there's still a lot of buildable land. And right now it's not paying much in taxes. But if there's a retail use, which is a lot of it, it borders H Street at the Avon line where the Dunkin' Donuts is. So, and it goes back towards Route 24. I mean, if that's a small retail mall, it's going to be doing a lot more in taxes than what it's doing for the town of Stoughton now. So it's going to be beneficial by, abandoning this paper street. There's no use for the town of Stoughton. We don't own the abutting land or anything except for the one small one. So it's going to turn that piece of property around into producing taxes for the taxpayers of Stoughton.
Okay. My only concern with this is that I don't know where, I don't have any information on this. So is this extremely time sensitive where it would have to be heard at the annual town meeting? Or?
Well, from what I'm told, and it may not, I mean, I don't know, but if we can do it and get it working sooner than later, as I had mentioned to you earlier, that I think there's going to be a need for us to allow the developer's attorney to speak with town council to make sure that the wording is acceptable to the town. That fee would be paid by the developer and his attorney. And then that would be something we would then vote and go to town meeting. I'm just looking at the possibility of, any way we can keep moving forward and try to make a piece of tax, a property that's not producing taxes to do that, that we should try and do it instead of waiting, if we have a special in the fall or, we may be having a special within the annual. But it just looks time sensitive. And if we can do this, I think it behooves us to. It's, we seem to try to move things through. It'd be nice to be able to move it through where it's going to be, for a reason of doing tax producing property. So.
Yeah, I don't doubt the merits to it. I don't even know where it is, what its value is.
Right.
We don't have that language from that other attorney. It makes it challenging to put it in the warrant. If I don't even know if this what language I would put in the warrant to make sure it's when we close it, it's sufficient. So.
Well, that's when I mean, again, if it doesn't, I just want to try and expedite the process and see if we can get it done in the time frame. If there's some reason we can't, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, we can't go to into the process, into the hearing process with an article that doesn't have an accurate description and a copy of a map. But I'm hoping, that's going to be coming very soon. I was hoping it was going to be here this week. But again, we have to have their attorney speak with our attorney, and I've been told that it would be something relatively a quick turnaround.
Mr. O'Regan?
I appreciate the purpose behind this, but I agree with you, Madam Chair, that I don't think this is quite ready. I have a couple of preliminary questions, which is, as I understand the statute, we would abandon a public way. I'm not familiar with anything to abandon a paper street. I'm familiar with a paper street being a plan on a street that has not been made into a public way. So if it's not even titled to the town, there's nothing for us to abandon. And if there is, as part of vetting this, before it goes to town meeting, I think we'd all probably agree with Mr. McCrisky to put it forward, but there would be some due diligence for the board to do before we decided to abandon public property for the benefit of a private developer. Among other things, maybe we would want to put it out to bid to get some tax money to pay for something. So the spirit of having something that's more useful in private hands than public hands, if we're not going to need it and it's just sitting there, I agree with. But I think there's a little more homework to do on this before it's ready. And I'd urge that we get it, and as soon as we're able to get the information, we should go for what's the acreage, how much it. Yeah, I tried to find this and I couldn't find it in Googling it. Now that he's described where it is, I probably would be able to see where it is. But that's my sense on this article, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, if I can, through you to the previous speaker. Town meeting voted to let this property go already. That vote has been taken. The property has to go out to bid. It's not going to be just handed to somebody. It has to go to bid. So that'll happen. And the reason that Norfolk County is because they have a right of way of it. Norfolk County has it because it was in the county layout. That's why it has to be done. So this due diligence has been going on for 5 years. I had asked about it when I got back on the board in 2009 as to where it stood, and basically it stood in where it was before. So, nothing had been done on it. People knew it was out there, and it was just one of those things that fell through the cracks. And, when I found that out, I started talking with staff. I've talked with the town manager about this in the past. I've talked with the town engineer about this. The town engineer has spoken with Norfolk County engineers. They know the town's position. So all this is now is taking all that time, from 2017 to 2019, and putting it back on track. And I can't put words in the engineer's mouth, but he has more or less said he's done everything, and the town is not in any unpeculiar position. It now just has to go to this point where the attorney and it's because we're gonna vote to abandon this paper street because it was in the county layout, and then it has to go out to bid, and that's where it lies. I mean, so it's done. It's gone everywhere it can go. Now it's just putting the the paper to pen with the right map number of the properties where it butts it. That's in private hands, as well as showing the layout. And I know that the town engineer is ready to do that at the time that comes forward.
Okay,
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
I was just, I haven't seen any of the it or the what that's behind this. So I don't even know. I mean, is it an easement? Yeah. Is it actual property? I don't know where it is. Like Mr. Regan said, I don't know how big it is. If there is all this backup from the engineer and town council, that's kind of what I need to be able to know what we're voting on here to put in the warrant. And what I have written down is literally just, I made that up. I don't have the language. I don't know. I don't know what we would properly put in the warrant, which is my concern, because we're going to end up just dismissing it if it's incorrectly put in there. So,
Madam Chair, if we end up dismissing it, we'll have to dismiss it if it's not ready. But that's the whole idea of having allowing the property owner that owns everything around it. And we don't own any property other than that small little postage stamp that town meeting voted years ago to forego. And if the other person's lawyer speaks with our lawyer, they pay our lawyer, and then we get the article the way that our town council wants it. Now, if it doesn't happen in short order, I'd be the first to say, well, we wait and we go down to the next town meeting. But and I agree with you. I don't want to go into anything haphazardly. I would hope that we should be hearing something within the next few days. And if it doesn't, I'd be the first to make a motion to pull it.
It's tough because it's 10 o'clock on the night of the closing of the warrant, and we don't have the language for the article. That's the tough.
Well, listen, I mean, I can't tell anyone how to vote. I think that we can have that done before it starts the hearing process. And to put it in this article, the way it's worded here, would just change the wording, you know, that meets it, you know, that explains the map and everything.
Yeah.
So, but,
I
all right, well,
think-
listen, I totally understand where you're coming from. I don't disagree, but I wouldn't be doing what I feel is right if I don't fight for it, you know, and try to get it so we can get it to town meeting. And, you know, I'd only ask if we can try a couple days, you know, to see if that comes forward. If not, we pull it.
Madam Chairman, if I may, I think this fits the category of placeholder articles that we had talked about not putting on a warrant because they're not in the process to get to yes. And the more the previous speaker was talking, the more questions came to my mind about what we're actually going to do here. I heard that it was already decided by a previous town meeting what to do with this property. I don't remember the exact words, but I would have wanted to know what vote that was. And then later on, I heard that we voted to abandon some other property, not this property. We need to know a whole lot more before we forward this to town meeting. And if it matches what the proponent of this has described, it makes sense. One of the things we were concerned about is sending things to town meeting. We know that the committees, at least what I've been informed, is the committees are eager. They're setting schedules, they're moving. And so to start, especially in a pandemic, the work of various volunteers on committees on an article that may well be pulled might not be fair. If we get it and we think we might have a special within the annual, there you go. But if there's no time pressure, I don't think this fits something we ought to do. And there's a number of technical issues to insert it and let town council draft it after a prospective buyer's lawyer has looked at it to make it work for the buyer.
Well, that's not true, Mr. O'Regan. That's not true at all.
That's what I heard.
You know, no, Mr. O'Regan, I got to stop because you're trying to twist it away. You're just trying to twist it here. You know, this is nothing more. The town meeting's already taken a vote on the land in the past, and you don't remember it. That's great, but the town meeting already voted to release this land. The paperwork is there. So, I mean, this is nothing more. We just put a $30 million placeholder for a fire station. We're not even sure if it's going to go there.
Please,
So-
Mr. McCrisky, please let Mr. O'Regan finish speaking before it's your turn to speak. Please.
If the town already voted to dispose of this land, then the initial question is, why would town meeting have to do anything else with respect to this land? If town meeting had already decided to do something with this land, and you've been investigating, Mr. McCrisky, why staff hasn't done something that staff might have, could have, would have, should have to dispose of it, that's a different issue, and I'd urge you to bring it forward to the board. So if there's some executive action that the executive authority of town, which is us, needs to do, we can do it. But it's not ready, and it's just not ready. And the more it's discussed, the more questions come up. So let's just get those questions answered, and
Okay, then
we'll put it on a warrant.
Then why don't we do that? The same thing with the fire station then, because you just made that same argument. It's the same factual argument for the fire station. So listen, I'm going to end it right there, Madam Chair. Whatever way the board decides to go, you know, I'm okay. I'm going to be voting to keep it in. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McCrisky. And again, I don't discredit the merits of this.
No, I don't question you at all.
I don't know what it is,
Nope.
to be quite honest. I just don't even know what it is, so I don't really feel comfortable putting in the placeholder language when, you know, we've had issues where there's been scope questions raised left and right. We have people who are really invested in analyzing that aspect of town meeting, and I would just hate to put something in that I don't feel comfortable is the correct wording. And as Mr. Regan stated, if we do have the special within the annual, I think if we're gathering the information the next several days, that might be the opportunity to put it in and keep it on the radar. We can add it to a future agenda so we can discuss and get these questions answered, and then make sure it gets in as soon as it possibly can. I just, hearing it for the first time tonight and not really knowing exactly how to even, I don't even know what the parcel number is, so I don't even know what to include in the warrant tonight when we close it. So that's my hold up here. And that's just kind of where I'm at.
Not a problem.
Mr. Cavey?
Thanks. I won't spend too much time other than just to say, I agree with what you just said. I think that we don't have enough to go on, and I don't mean this to offend certainly Mr. Krisky, who's asked to be put in, but there is sort of this. Well, there's going to be something having to do with the property somewhere that's a paper street. There's really not enough to go on. However, I think this is probably, given just the timing of it, I understand that we couldn't get it together quickly enough. But this really does seem to me, because there's no cost involved. This seems like a really good example of something that could be put in a special town meeting that happens within the annual, and we'll just get it all together and put it in there. So I definitely support that. I think this is the type of thing that, so long as it's something that can be explained and understood, I think this is exactly the type of thing that should go before town meeting.
Would anybody like to make a motion on this article?
Well, Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we pull Article 37, petition to abandon Paper Street off of Page Street.
Motion to pull the article made.
Seconded.
Discussion, motion. There's no additional discussion. I'll call for a vote. Mr. McCrisky?
No.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Cavey?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So again, Mr. McCrisky, we'll get that information, and if there's going to be a special within the annual, I think that would be an opportune time to include it, and I'll make a note to include it on a future agenda as well.
Okay.
Don't lose sight of it, because
No.
that happens pretty quickly around here. So I want to.
Oh, I know. Hey, it's not my property, so I'm just trying to move it along. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The next article is the charter change to extend the term limits for members of the Charter Review Committee. This is the language I included that was provided to me by the Charter Review Committee. I wasn't sure if any additional language had been discussed or determined related to the vacancies. Mr. Regan, you were, I think, tasked with working on that, maybe?
That was my tasked charge. I was able to have some really good conversations with Brian Holmes, the chair of the committee, and kick around some ideas. But in the span of a week between when we heard it and drafting it, what became clear to me was that we didn't have enough time. I certainly wouldn't want to add language to a request that the committee forwarded to us if there was any question about whether or not they would be amenable to it. And so rather than risk even that possibility, I did suggest some language. And if the committee takes it up, perhaps they can move to amend if they like it, and the moderator might accept it. And if not, we can always revisit this at a later time if this language doesn't work. I'll tell you, just so people are understanding the questions on this, it's laudatory for stability on this committee, because having people come and go year to year, I can see as an issue. But one of the questions was, if people leave in the middle of a 2-year term, does someone fill the term, or do we start having terms no one can know who's on how long? Because if someone's elected mid-year, is their 2-year term mid-year for 2 years? And another one was to not have the entire committee subject to turnover at one time, because some continuity is helpful. And those are the 2 areas that I suggested. So, but as it stands, I wouldn't want to make any changes that the committee hadn't seen at this point, and there wasn't time to get that done.
Mr. KB?
Thank you. Given the language we have here, we do have that the very ending where it says or take any other action relative thereto. With relation, so I wonder if this language is sufficient, but when we get to the actual motion, we can include greater specificity. Is that am I understanding that well enough? Is that something that people agree could be accomplished just by a motion that fills in the blanks?
If the moderator, Madam Chair, if the moderator determines that the motion is within the scope of the article, even with the phrase and other action relative thereto, it's still a call of the chair. But again, Madam Chair, I wouldn't want to tinker with their language at this point. If it was worth a run up to try to do it, but there just wasn't enough space to do it.
I'm of a similar thinking. This is what was provided to us, and it's not really our authority to change their language. That I think they're meeting in the next couple weeks, so they'll decide as a body, and then they amend, and it's allowable and within the scope, then so be it. So I'm okay with leaving it as is. Thank you, Mr. Regan, for following up on that. Our last 2 articles, as is customary with our sort of ordering here, is we just put the petitioned articles in as they're received. Looks like we have 2, which I can pull up. If you hold on a moment. They'll go in as they were submitted. I just did not have time to retype into Word. So, I was not going to make Dr. Grimm do that either. So this is the proposed zoning amendment. Just want to see when these were received. That says 30th, and that's the 31st. So the zoning amendment was received on December 30th. That petitioned article, and the other petitioned article was received on the 31st. So those are, that would be number 38 and 39. And that should be everything. So this language here, where it says petitioned article 2, I'll insert that specifically, the actual language from that article directly in. And that will be what we'll read in the warrant. I think that's everything. Somehow we made it in under 40 articles. So, is there anything else for members of the board on this? Do we have any motions?
Madam Chair, I move that we insert the articles, excluding those that have been withdrawn, in the order presented in the draft.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Is there discussion on that motion? Okay. Hearing none, to insert the articles, excluding those that have been withdrawn, and the order is presented. For a vote, Mr. McCrisky?
Yes.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Cavey?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Any additional motions?
Madam Chair, I move that we refer the warrant as so prepared to Town Council, and that final language for the warrant be prepared upon review and advice of Town Council.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there discussion on this motion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for a vote. On the motion, Mr. McCrisky?
Yes.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Cavey?
Yes.
I vote yes. Passes.
And Madam Chair, I move that we forward the warrant as just voted to the moderator, the Rules Committee, and the Committee on Finance and Taxation with a message that by vote of the board, it has been referred for final preparation and language to Town Council.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any additional discussion on Mr. O'Regan's motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Mr. McCrisky?
Yes.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Cavey?
Yes.
I vote yes. All right.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Ms. Walsh?
besides inserting the articles, you have to officially vote to close the warrant.
Yes, I think that was going to be the next motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She does this to me every year.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's one motion left, but she beat me to it. So, thank you, Ms. Walsh.
In fact, the last time she did it, I said to her, that's my next motion. Madam Chair, I move to close the warrant for the 2021 annual town meeting.
Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. McCrisky. On the motion to close the 2021 annual town meeting warrant, made and seconded. Any additional discussion? Okay, hearing none. On the motion, Mr. McCrisky,
Yes.
Mr. O'Regan,
Yes.
Ms. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Cavey,
Yes.
I vote yes. All right. Thank you. All right. We did have the discussion on the Fanon Drive parcel, which should have been in like an item 4, not an item 9, but that's okay. So tonight we do have an executive session with 2 items on it. Item A is to discuss strategy with respect to litigation pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2 for Sandra Lucian Calixte versus Neil David et al. Federal docket case number 117 CV 11312 NMG, and executive session minutes from January 5th, January 12th, and January 19th, 2021 for approval. Make a finding that it's against the town's litigating and negotiating position to discuss these matters in open session, and therefore they should be discussed in executive session. there a motion to enter into executive session?
So made.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, call for a vote. Mr. McCrisky?
Yes.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Cavey?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Board will adjourn from its executive session and we will not return to open session. Our next meeting is Tuesday, February 9th. Thank you all and have a great night.